across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000 is where you will phone us. Thank you to Julia. She's back, of course, on Monday here at the home of, well, mostly common sense. Coming up this afternoon, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has attacked Nigel Farage's plans to reverse cuts to winter fuel payments and to lift the two-child benefit cap, warning irresponsible splurge would be like Liz Truss all over again and drive up mortgages, bills and the cost of living, he says. Here's a quick question. Who do you trust on the economy, Labour or Reform UK? We'll open the lines on that one now. Also this afternoon, Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, has taken matters into his own hands, filming himself confronting fare dodgers on the London Tube. At one point, asking someone if someone had a knife on them, warning their actions are chipping away at society. Robert Jenrick will join us live a little later in the programme. It's quite an extraordinary film that he put out. It's just a small piece he made, but powerful stuff, and sort of shows up Sadiq Khan's London for what it currently is. And the British military will spend over $1 billion on AI and a hacking attack team. This is the Defence Secretary John Healey warning that the keyboard has become a weapon of war against threats like Russia. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. So, who do you trust on the economy, Labour or Reform UK? Keir Starmer is clearly a worried man, not spooked by the usual things in political life, a scandal, a tough opposition, or the thought of sending soldiers to war. He's spooked by a political party that has just 5 MPs. Reform UK have well and truly lobbed a rocket up Starmer's left-wing trouser leg. When else have you seen a Prime Minister cobble together a press conference to try and ward off a minor political party, while you have a majority of 170? This is the new political landscape, kids. Of course, Reform UK might only have enough MPs to comfortably sit in the back of a black cab, but they are, let's face it, no longer a minor party. The local elections saw to that. The polls show that. And Keir Starmer being forced to write an entire script about them absolutely shows that. An hour ago, the Prime Minister played the trust card. Let's have a listen to what he said. And I don't think we can...
economic plans that contain billions upon billions of completely unfunded spending. Precisely the sort of irresponsible splurge that sent your mortgage cost, your bills, and the cost of living through the roof. It's Liz Truss all over again.
There it is, labelling Farage as Liz Truss 2.0. He said the Reform leader was making the exact same bet as the Conservative former Prime Minister, that you can spend tens of billions on tax cuts without a proper way of paying for it. Keir accused Farage of using your family finances, your mortgage, your bills as a gambling chip on his mad experiment, adding the result will be the same. Mr Starmer did, however, sought to contrast himself personally with Farage, saying he knew what it was like when your family can't pay the bills, and that was why Labour would never put working people through a crisis like Liz Truss ever again. Couldn't be more different, he was saying. Liz Truss, of course, famously blew the economy into smithereens and lasted about 7 minutes in office. Her mini-budget back in 2022 included those big tax breaks, 45 billion quid's worth of what they call unfunded tax cuts, sparked turmoil on the financial markets, big increase in mortgage rates. But there were some economists who actually thought and believed that her plan, given time, might have worked. Whatever way you slice it, you have to conclude. I mean, let this just settle for 1 second. Digest it for a moment. What I just said at the beginning. Here's a party with 5 MPs. Here's a Prime Minister with a 170 majority. And he is putting together a press conference to ward off the man who's got the 5 MPs. I mean, that tells you absolutely something. By the way, the Conservatives are just not in the picture, right? I mean, this is, as a side point, a huge swipe at Kemi Badenoch. He's not debating with the Tories, he's debating with Reform. But here's the question, who do you trust on the economy? Labour or Reform UK? Forget immigration, forget those specific issues. On the economics of the piece, remember Starmer, whatever you want to look at this, has only been in office, 8 months or whatever it is, 9 months. Who do you trust of those two? Would it be Keir Starmer? Would it be Nigel Farage? Labour or Reform? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Emma Trimble back with us, the writer, broadcaster and presenter. Emma, good afternoon to you.
Good to be with you, Ian.
Nice to have you with us again. So let's pick up on that point. The Prime Minister warning that Nigel Farage's policies will lead to an economic meltdown. Let's have another listen to what he said just an hour ago.
That's the question you have to ask about Nigel Farage. Can you trust him? Can you trust him with your future? Can you trust him with your jobs? Can you trust him with your mortgages, your pensions, your bills? And he gave the answer on Tuesday, a resounding no. He set out economic plans that contained billions upon billions of completely unfunded spending. Precisely the sort of irresponsible splurge that sent your mortgage cost, your bills and the cost of living through the roof. It's Liz Truss all over again. Now, in opposition, we said that she would crash the economy and leave you to pick up the bill. And we were right. And we were elected to fix that mess. Now, in government, we're once again fighting the same fantasy.
The same fantasy, Emma. And just putting the details of this to one side, as I said at the beginning, extraordinary that the Prime Minister has to cobble together a press conference to ward off what can only be seen as a threat from a party that has 5 MPs. That just tells us all, doesn't it, how the political terrain has completely changed.
Yeah, Reform have put the fear of God into them clearly, and it's actually quite remarkable because it's politically naive from Keir Starmer to actually address this in the first place. As you say, sort of devoting a whole press conference to it, is presenting Reform not only as the opposition, completely ignoring the Conservative Party as irrelevant, but is also positioning them as a viable option as the next ruling party, as the next government. Yeah. And I think the reason why obviously Labour have gone into a panic mode over this is because where Reform have outflanked the Conservative Party on the right on issues to do with immigration, cultural issues, fighting against progressive causes, they're now have clearly taken the line, the decision tactically to outflank the Labour Party on the left economically by criticising and saying that they would reinstate a lot of those things that the Labour Party is saying that they're now going to cut. Lots of things that are, quite frankly, very unpopular with the British public. Now, I don't necessarily think that Reform are doing this purely for strategic reasons. Obviously, as this shows, this is strategic gold, and Nigel Farage is very good at leveraging what little power he has. He did the same thing with Brexit and is now doing the same with the few MPs that the Reform Party have. This also resonates with the British public, and I think that is the reason why Keir Starmer is obviously so fearful.
Yeah, I completely. And it's not just, I mean, there's loads of statistics you can throw at this. More people voted for Brexit than voted for this current Labour government. There's stats like that out there. So clearly we're 4 years away from an election, Emma, but, you know, at this stage, here we have a Prime Minister not battling out with the leader of the official opposition, Kemi Badenoch, but battling out with a party that sits there with 5 MPs. So in addition to how interesting and curious and profound that is, it's also interesting from the perspective of Kemi Badenoch. She's not really invited to the party these days.
Yeah, it's not a good sign for the Conservative Party. There is the other aspect of this, as you say, 2029 is very far away. It puts the Conservative Party in a position where really the ground that they would need to argue for is to be right wing, more right wing, on those issues to do with borders. Actually, Robert Jenrick is being a lot more outspoken on those things than Kemi Badenoch is at the moment. But also to take back the territory of being to the right on economics, because of course, as you say, Reform have been, they have made the argument for low tax, but also more public spending on certain areas, nationalising certain parts of the economy, like steel, 50% of utilities they've talked about nationalising. So there is an area there that does open up for the Conservatives in the long term if they wanted to kind of return to the Thatcherite line. But of course, the problem there is that the electorate has moved on from that kind of thing. I think that the Reform Party appeals so much more to the majority view of the British people. And as you say, this Labour Party, they might have so many more seats, such a large majority, but they have a large majority on a historically low share of the vote. So even though it looks as if they've got a large majority, actually the security of this government is quite fragile in terms of popular opinion. And I think that the Labour Party are aware of that. The local elections have shown that. And actually, if the Conservative Party don't start to up their game, then frankly, it is just the case that Reform now, at least in terms of public debate, are the opposition.
Couple of points that have come in on this. Phil Down says, Starmer says that Nigel has billions of unfunded tax cuts when Labour borrowed 20 billion last month alone. So there's that. Thank you, Phil, for that. And Sean in Bridlington says the bond yields and the economy are worse under Starmer and Reeves today than they were under Truss and Kwarteng in 2022. Again, another fair point on this one. We will see and watch this one popcorn in hand as this develops over the coming years. Plenty of material for us, I guess. Now, here's a man who we, of course, really believe wants to be the Tory leader, Robert Jenrick. This is fascinating. Robert Jenrick decided to go out with a little camera crew, he's the Shadow Justice Secretary, of course, and release a video on X showcasing the amount of people who jump the barriers at train stations. He was down there on the tube. Let's have a look at what he found.
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? Do you want to go back and pay like everybody else? Do you think it's all right not to pay? Why don't you go back and pay? You can say off as much as you want. Oh, no, but everyone else has to pay. You're carrying a knife, do you say? Nearly 1 in 25 people using London's public transport aren't paying for it. So there's 8 officers down there, but 1 minute away, that gate's wide open. It's also just annoying watching so many people break the law and get away with it.
Or at least most of it.
Right, should we go over here to these guys here? Excuse me, gents.
Hello, hello.
You're on camera, mate. You're bang to rights.
Just step to the side and...
All right, thanks very much, guys. It's the same with bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops. It's all chipping away at society. The state needs to reassert itself and go after lawbreakers.
Robert Jenrick has turned into Dog the Bounty Hunter. Wow, he's out there catching the bad guys, it seems, Emma.
I've got a lot of respect for Robert Jenrick. I think actually the campaign that he's run after the leadership election campaign has been much better than the one when he was actually trying to become leader of the Conservative Party. Yeah. This isn't the first video of this kind that he's done. He's been really going out there and getting stuck in. I think a lot of people will look at this with admiration, actually noting the courage to go up to people on London's public transport, because as he said there, people do carry knives. And there's been a lot of talk recently, not just about fare dodging, I see it all the time, but also about the general standards of the public space. On the tube, for example, the Bakerloo line is completely plastered with graffiti. It just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. And the message that this sends to people who live here, people who visit here, is that London is an increasingly lawless city. And so I think actually Robert Jenrick is putting himself in. He's doing something very interesting that I don't think that we've seen another politician do before. He isn't the leader of the Conservative Party, but he's acting as if he is, in the sense that he really is going out there, getting stuck in, making sure that he is representing the public's views, publicly using new media and so on. And he's doing a service. It's not just political, but he's sort of, as you say, Dog the Bounty Hunter style.
Louis Theroux. I mean, it's all kind of happening here. I don't know. I hope he doesn't follow all of Louis Theroux's ideas, because that would take us to an interesting place. But I like it, and I think if you want to, we talked about this yesterday. Robert Jenrick was once so quiet. He was known as the librarian to some of his colleagues, and then, of course, quit the previous Tory government, now finding a different kind of niche. I think it's almost a dead cert he'll be the leader of the Conservative Party by the end of the year, if not the first half of next. And this kind of thing does work. It does sell on the doorsteps. This makes him look like he's in touch. It also has another effect, of course, because the person responsible for all of those trains in London is Sadiq Khan, the Labour mayor. He's losing £130 million a year through fare evasion. You haven't seen Sadiq going down there and doing that, but here's Robert Jenrick, literally with his sleeves rolled up, looking the part, got the kahunas to do it. A few more of those videos, I think the fella's home and dry. I don't know about the number 10 job, but certainly the leader of the Tory party.
Yeah, it also works particularly well because, as a lot of people have been pointing out, Kemi has been surprisingly quiet, particularly because she is such a sort of robust debater. We haven't seen as much of her as I think many people would have expected. And so to see Robert Jenrick going out and actually exposing the sorts of things that Londoners, British people, not just here in London, he's gone and explored the issue of bins not being collected as well up in the north. He's going out there and he's exposing what British people are putting up with every day, and he's doing so in a way that is remarkably relatable for a politician.
Yeah, it's very accessible, isn't it, to see him in that way? If you compare him to Keir Starmer in the clip that you used earlier, he's doing those hand gestures that everybody sees as a mark of an untrustworthy politician. He hasn't seemed to be able to ditch that sort of very stilted, wooden politician hand gestures. By comparison, it doesn't look as if Robert Jenrick is rolling his sleeves up just for the optics. He really is getting stuck in, and I think people admire the authenticity of that. I think they admire the fact that he's drawing attention to things that are actually making their lives worse. And of course, he must have one eye on the leadership of the Conservative Party, and I think that would make it would make an interesting difference to these dynamics with reform, because they're in between now and 2029. Of course, that is a long period of time, maybe not in political terms, but a lot can happen, and so it really is all to play for. And it will be interesting to see what happens if Robert Jenrick does at some point in the next couple of years become leader of the Conservative Party. And when, of course, he was vying for the position of leader of the Tories, he made no secret that he thought that he had a very big sympathy and understanding of Reform UK, something that Kemi Badenoch didn't quite go as far as he did. So that would perhaps bode well for many voters. We'll have more in a few moments. Emma, stay with us. Emma Trimble, the broadcaster and journalist, is with us, just looking over the big stories of the day. Lots more still to come. Angela Rayner is on our radar as well. Stand by for that. And Britain to unleash an army of hackers on President Putin. What's all that about? Find out next on Talk.
One of the things that a lot of people don't realise about cannabis, that excessive use can produce psychosis.
Yeah.
So we do get quite a lot of incidents within London of psychopathic behaviour of people who are extreme cannabis users. So there is some truth in the fact that it's a damaging drug.
Yeah, I think that's a massive issue that's often overlooked. People think of it as just some sort of, we just a few people sort of sitting around smoking dope. It's not. That's certainly not the kind of drug that a lot of people are using.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And of course, just on the back of that Robert Jenrick story, Robert Jenrick joins us a little later in the programme to talk about what he found when he went out there catching rail dodgers, but almost doing the work of Transport for London. At the same time. More on that coming later. Emma Trimble is with us, the writer, broadcaster and journalist. Let's have a look at this story. Emma, Britain to unleash army of hackers on Putin. Defence Secretary John Healey announcing a £1 billion investment in AI and a cyber and electromagnetic command to counter hostile states like the Russians.
Yeah,
what do we make of this?
It sounds like something from a film, doesn't it? The cyber and electromagnetic command. I find it quite exciting. I mean, the proof of these things is always in the pudding. It's almost a surprise that we don't have something like this. If this really is an announcement, you would have hoped that we would have had, at least maybe not publicly known, but it seems as if it might not necessarily be the most wise thing to announce, to let China and Russia know that we're looking into doing this. Now, according to the report on this, in the last 2 years, the MOD alone has been subject to 90,000 cyber attacks from hostile states like Russia and China. We've seen the same thing with companies, Harrods, Co-op, and personally distressing to me, M&S, which still, I think, doesn't have its online orders up.
No, it's still up the chute, isn't it?
Really devastating cyber attacks. And so I think, it's obviously something that Britain should be doing. It's very important. It's the future of warfare. Despite the fact that it's so excitingly named, I would at least like to hope that some of this stuff has already been going on behind the scenes. But it also involves things like using AI for warfare to connect together the RAF, the Navy, and the Army. So it seems like an exciting announcement. But like I say, the proof of the pudding is always in the eating.
Indeed. Let's move on to Angela Rayner. She's ruled out decriminalising cannabis despite admitting to taking all sorts from paracetamol to codeine. While Sadiq Khan, of course, wants it legalised, and Dorset Police Chief, who spoke to us yesterday, says it should be treated like crack. Have a listen.
No, they're wrong, actually, and I'll tell you why. They should reclassify it as a Class A drug. Now, I know that is counterintuitive, and that is the exact opposite of what Mr. Khan is asking for. But I think that there is some really good evidence now. Since 2016, there has been more evidence coming out of those areas which have decriminalised or legalised. And when you look at that and you look at the epidemiology, you can see birth defects, cancer, other issues are increased in those areas where it has been decriminalised.
That's what David Sidgwick, the Crime Commissioner for Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset, told us yesterday, Emma. And today, Angela Rayner, who I absolutely sure I can't be bothered to look, frankly, but I reckon if I did, I'd find loads of examples where she's called for the decriminalisation of drugs, particularly like cannabis. But of course, you get into office and something rather different happens. I don't know whether they just can't be bothered with the argument or whether a top civil servant says, don't go there.
Yeah, I wonder whether it's another case, the Labour government, of the rubber meeting the road, and maybe the realisation that on the one hand, there are benefits to legalising cannabis. You can get tax money from it. I think it's quite a complicated issue because I do appreciate that a lot of libertarian conservatives have some very good, strong arguments on this. But on the other hand, it does cause things like psychosis. I've seen what weed has done to people, and I think that it's a really evil substance. So it's very interesting, particularly coming from Sadiq Khan calling for this to be legalized. He's not obviously not calling for the production of cannabis to be legalized. I think he's talking about possession and possibly the dealing of cannabis. But it just contributes to the same sense that of, like we were saying earlier with the fare dodgers, of London becoming increasingly lawless, and actually those who are in positions of authority in London, and Sadiq Khan being the figurehead of that authority, a sense of a sort of disregard for common sense, because cannabis, of course, is wrapped up in so much crime, and crime is such an enormous problem in London that this just seems like a completely self-indulgent suggestion that maybe he thinks will garner him some votes amongst cannabis users, or perhaps even dealers.
And just on the point of Angela Rayner, you just know in X amount of years' time, when she's no longer in office, she'll give an interview with someone. She'll say, "Well, I never believed that, but collective responsibility. I had to say it, but no, I would legalise it." You can see that coming round the tracks. And final one here: Brits have warned that drinking water could run out in some areas in just 10 years. Ministers have warned that mass immigration, climate pressures and crumbling infrastructure could leave parts of Britain without drinking water in a decade. I mean, this is a harrowing prediction that almost came out of nowhere. I know the Environment Secretary Steve Reed has sort of fast-tracked 2 new reservoirs. Reservoirs are a little bit like prisons, for some reason it's just a big hole, right? Basically, it's a big hole with a pipe attached to it, and then it rains and fills it in. But for some reason, we haven't built a reservoir since about 2000 or something crazy like that, possibly even before. But we could be without water altogether in some areas.
Yeah, no kidding. You let in masses of new people and you don't build any infrastructure to support it.
Funny that, isn't it?
And then you're going to end up with not very simple things like not having enough drinking water if you don't have the foresight to provide for it. But I think, the issue here is not so much the building of reservoirs. Again, it returns to the issue of mass migration that nobody consented to. They're getting rid of all the red tape so these reservoirs can be built. It means that local people can't necessarily object to where these reservoirs are being put. And yet again, I think many people will feel that they are being trampled upon. They can try to put this down to things like climate change, but it's obviously because the country has been swamped with enormous numbers of people without the infrastructure there to support it. And I'm sure that people in the Labour Party, Labour supporters, will make the same argument that they've made about housing. It's because we're not building enough houses rather than because we're letting all of these people in. No, it's because the population is increasing at such an uncontrolled, rapid speed that it's just not possible for us to be able to, even do the most basic things like provide drinking water for all of those people.
Indeed, pretty basic stuff.
How many of the people using the drinking water supply will be illegal migrants that aren't even, necessarily recognised by the authorities? It was actually, I think it was Thames Water. It was one of their studies that had been used to try and figure out exactly how many illegal migrants were living in London. So it's just one of those things that I think is another symptom of the mass migration that nobody wanted.
Indeed, 100%. Listen, Emma, always great to have you on. Thank you for your time. Emma Trimble, the journalist and broadcaster, with us on the programme. We're going to pick up on that story of reform and Keir Starmer's. The more you think about it, how profound and unprecedented this is, that Starmer would call a press conference to have a pop at reform. Not the Tories, their history, as far as he's concerned, reform, where he's looking at reform, have parked their tanks on his lawn. He's responded. Who do you trust on the economy, Labour or Reform? We'll speak to Mayuran Senthilnathan in just a moment, Reform UK activist and former parliamentary candidate, and Richard Corbett, former leader of the European Parliamentary Party for Labour. And also George Magnus will be back on with us, the economist, to give us an overview of who might be right and who might be wrong on all of this. Details on the way. And, of course, over to you. Who do you trust? Labour or Reform, Keir or Nigel? Lines are open. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Lots of comments coming through. Joanna in Salisbury says you played a Starmer clip about unfunded and after pensions, etc. Allegedly in 14 years, Conservatives left 20 billion black hole. In 11 months, Labour have managed a 35 billion black hole. And Rachel Thieves is eyeing up pensions and ripping into people's inheritance, pot and kettle. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are making a similar point. We'll come back to that. Keir Starmer has hit out at what he calls Nigel Farage's fantasy economics, claiming his plans are like Liz Truss all over again. The PM has accused the Reform leader of making unfunded promises to scrap the two-child benefit cap and restore all winter fuel payments. Let's have another listen then to what Keir Starmer said about Mr Farage just an hour or so ago.
He set out economic plans that contain billions upon billions of completely unfunded spending. Precisely the sort of irresponsible splurge that sent your mortgage cost, your bills, and the cost of living through the roof. It's Liz Truss all over again.
It's Liz Truss all over again. In a moment, we'll speak to George Magnus, the economist, just to get an overview on what's going here. First, Mayurin Senthil-Nathan, Reform UK activist and former parliamentary candidate, is with us, along with Richard Corbett, former leader of the European Parliamentary Labour Party. Afternoon to you both. Mayurin, firstly, I mean, there it is. He's having a pop at your man. He's gone squarely for the Liz Truss card. What are you making of this? Prime Minister putting together a press conference not to attack the Tories, but to attack Reform UK.
Well, I think this is a landmark press conference because it basically initiates Reform as the official opposition and officially gets rid of the Uni Party, which involves the Conservatives. I think Labour may have a constitutional authority, but I think Keir Starmer is fast realising that Reform has the people's authority. But in terms of fantasy economics, I think Labour are actually living out fantasy economics in real time. And they've been promised, I think, a manifesto of £10 billion worth of spending. They're spending about £60 billion. They cry about growth, wanting growth, lamenting about how much we need to get growth. And then they give extortionate, no strings attached pay rises to public sector workers while stifling the private sector with national insurance rises. Rachel Reeves is completely out of her depth with her fantasy economics, and she's fast driving the country towards, I think, a kind of IMF situation. And they follow the OBR. The OBR is effectively a redundant organisation. It gets literally everything wrong, almost every prediction they make. Even if it's in the next month, in terms of borrowing costs, they get that wrong. And on top of that, we've got net zero policy with Mad Ed spending things like £22 billion on carbon capture. Harry Cole, from your station, he released a leaked a document from Whitehall, basically saying that that net zero total could end up knocking off something like 10% of GDP, because what Nigel quoted when he said about £40 billion worth of savings by scrapping net zero was very conservative. When you look at the grid, when you look at the regulations and the tentacles of net zero throughout the country, it is a wet blanket that is starving this country of growth. And Rachel Reeves is living out, I repeat that, fantasy economics in real time.
OK, we'll come. Richard Corbett is with us as well. Richard, now we'll come to some of the details in a second, but did you not find, even as a Labour man, a little strange that the Prime Minister felt severely threatened to have to, 4 years before an election, to have to call a press conference to have a pop at a party that has just 5 MPs while he has a majority of 170? You ever seen anything like that before?
Well, given the collapse of the Conservative Party, it may well be the case that Reform is in a position to be the main challenger at forthcoming elections. And even if it isn't, since the Conservatives tend to jump on the bandwagon set by Reform when it comes to various policies here and there, it's worth addressing the reality of those policies and what they would entail for the country.
What do you make of what Mayor has just said in terms of the details here? You know, Rachel Reeves can't really be trusted. They've taken the 20 billion black hole and almost doubled it. Some are suggesting completely out of control in terms of a direction and a solid growth plan, etc. I'm paraphrasing here, but those are some of the common views, including what we just heard, about what is happening with Labour at the moment.
Well, it's a bit rich, really, when coming from a party that doesn't seem to be able to add up. I mean, look at the economy. Yes, Labour did inherit a dire situation, especially when it comes to public finances and the economy as a whole. But look, wages are now growing faster than inflation. We've had 4 cuts in interest rates, which will feed through to people's mortgages getting less costly. The economy is growing much more than had been expected. At the moment, these things can fluctuate, of course. At the moment, it's the highest growth rate in the G7, the world's 7 largest economies, free market economies. So those aren't bad results, but there is a historical legacy to deal with, which is the dire state of public finances. And to play loose and fast with public finances, as the Reform Party and others seem to want to do, would indeed lead to a Liz Truss type situation with the economy crashing, mortgage rates soaring.
Mayor, Mayor, just respond to that, because that obviously was the Prime Minister's central accusation. This is Liz Truss 2.0. It's all very well talking about spending this and cutting that, etc., but you'll essentially blow the economy.
It's the fact that they want to both spend more and cut taxes. It doesn't add up.
OK, it doesn't add up, he says.
Well, I think you have to understand that the establishment, media and political class aren't used to hearing things like scrapping net zero, right? You've had years, almost decades, of a whole establishment just saying net zero is almost like divine law enshrined into what policy should be. And we're saying we're going to pick something like that up and throw it away completely. When you talk about the Liz Truss budget, Richard Tice was on record pretty recently where he talked about a Doge mentality, government spending cuts, and then looking to make tax cuts. So the thing you have to understand is it's not just policy, it's execution of policy. And that's what the Liz Truss government failed to understand. But I will add a little bit of sympathy to Liz Truss, because there was an LDI situation with the Bank of England as well, which made the whole situation blow up as it did. But nonetheless, she made mistakes. She announced tax cuts without spending cuts. What Richard Tice was saying is spending cuts, massive spending cuts, and then tentative tax cuts as we start to see the vital signs of the economy improve.
Well,
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, let's start with this scrapping of net zero. What does that bit of jargon mean? It means abandoning the switch from largely imported and very expensive and polluting fossil fuels to cheaper, largely domestically produced and clean energy. That's in our interest economically and environmentally and in terms of jobs in this country. So to scrap that, which is indeed a legal obligation enacted by the last government with cross-party support at the time, scrapping that would be a complete disaster environmentally, economically, and in terms of British jobs for British people.
Well, I think it's already been, it would actually liberate the economy. And Tony Blair, one of, a Labour pin-up, basically smacked the bottom of Ed Miliband and sent him to his room when it comes to net zero, basically saying he's out of touch with the British people. It won't work. We produce less than 1% of carbon emissions. Renewables are intermittent, so you're going to need backup with gas. That makes gas prices more expensive because they're spot prices. You have to import fracked gas from abroad because you don't want to actually frack your own gas domestically. All of this is a complete nonsense. All right, we have to refigure the whole national grid.
You have backup with nuclear in Britain, and you also have backup with interconnectors, so that when the sun is shining less but the wind is blowing, you trade across Europe.
We're using gas backup stations that are much higher cost.
By the way, you're looking at all this and coming up with these new issues which you hadn't harped on before as a party, because Nigel Farage doesn't want to talk about Brexit anymore because he realises that people now consider Brexit to have been a big mistake, and he's one of those to blame for it. That's why he's suddenly leaping on a whole load of bandwagons.
Who are the people, Richard? Richard, can I just ask? I often hear
without leaping on it.
Richard, I often hear Labour voices
to avoid discussing his own record.
Richard, I often hear Labour voices and people like yourself making the point that people say Brexit has been a mistake. Who are those people? Because other than hearing commentators and former or current politicians who were Remainers, I don't tend to meet those people. Who are they?
Well, one look at the tracker opinion polls that ask the same question each month on a whole range of issues, including the one, do you think Brexit was the right thing to do or was a mistake? And it's steadily climbing every month, slowly but surely, with the numbers going up, saying it was a mistake.
Is it climbing as fast as Nigel Farage's popularity, though, Robert?
In the sectors where it was promised that their lives would be improved by Brexit, and they're realising that the claims made by the Leave campaign were a load of nonsense.
Well, Richard, I said, is it climbing as fast as Nigel Farage's popularity and Reform's popularity? Because whatever you say there, notwithstanding that, I mean, they are certainly flying in the polls at the moment.
Because it's approaching 60% saying Brexit was a mistake. So that's at a much higher level than 20-odd% of voting intentions for any political party, of course.
Mayor, do you want to come back on that? Brexit was a mistake, and it doesn't seem to have affected, in some cases, the popularity of Mr. Farage.
He'd be in trouble with Nigel.
Well, it certainly hasn't really affected the popularity of reform by any means. Look, I think the whole Brexit situation was the country voted for one thing. It was picked up by Theresa May, who was a Remainer, who saw it as a damage limitation exercise, so tried to align with the EU as much as possible and didn't understand what Brexit was about. Boris Johnson then picked it up for political expediency. He didn't understand what the vision of Brexit was about. He had a whole party and a whole establishment that was lazy, arrogant and incompetent, that didn't deregulate, didn't control the borders, in fact flung them open even more. So they actually betrayed the Brexit voters. And so that's why you might see some of the opinion polls. But I think what you have to understand is, you made the point, Ian, reform, Nigel Farage, Mr. Brexit himself, is way ahead of every other party. So that speaks for volumes. That speaks for itself.
Listen, we stop there, guys. We could continue for probably another couple of hours, maybe even a few days on this one, I think, and we will revisit. Mayor in Central Nathan, thank you. Reform UK activist and former parliamentary candidate. And Richard Corbett was the other voice you heard there, former leader of the European Parliamentary Labour Party. We'll talk to George Magnus in just a moment. Comments coming in from you on this one. Sean says, Ian, what a joke, Starmer's press conference. The nation is feeling a bigger strain over the past 10 months than it has for decades. Reform UK have said how they would fund policies, scrapping net zero, billions, DEI, tightening of flimsy benefit purse strings that will put some money back into the government coffers, not like Labour, who are crippling the UK with high energy and taxing us to the hilt and giving us nothing back, says Sean. Thank you for that. Let's speak with George Magnus, former UBS chief economist, with us now. George, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you.
Now, of course, it's the usual thing, isn't it? If you ask, three economists what the answer is to something, you'll get 7 different answers. So it's always tricky. Sometimes it depends on where the economist sits politically, but being as objective as we can. Let's just firstly take that Liz Truss budget back in 2022, the omni-shambles budget, the car crash, whatever phrase you want to apply to it. There were some voices, some dissenters, some people at the back at the time said, now hang on, if you'd given her a bit of time on this, this could have worked. She had to walk the plank, and of course we will never know. What's your view specifically on that point, taking us back 3 years?
Well, I think, if you think about the starting point, the starting point is the British economy is not in a great place. We have some excellent firms and, we do some things we do really, really well. But if you look at it in the round, we've had no productivity growth since 2014. We have a fiscal position which is unsustainable. And we don't really have and haven't had a program of reform to try to improve things and kind of get us off to a new track. So Liz Truss's program, sat particularly uncomfortably with financial markets, because the one thing that kind of financial order and financial discipline requires, they don't mind tax cuts, they don't mind spending cuts, but financial markets really need to understand that somebody's done the arithmetic, and that we're not on a kind of an open-ended spree, which is what the interpretation of Liz Truss's program was, which was that it was all about going for growth, which is fine, but actually, how do you do that without causing the economy to get into an even deeper black hole? So, when Keir Starmer talks about this today, as he did with Farage, I mean, actually Farage should take it as a compliment in a way, but in a perverse way.
Yeah.
But that's what he's getting at is, you can't just, motherhood and apple pie is lovely, but, it has to be paid for.
Nigel Farage's position seems to be, and our previous Reform UK speaker did refer to this, George, that when political parties, particularly Labour and the Conservatives, talk about, making spending cut prudence and being, careful with public spending and making sure that your abacus balances at the end of the day, etc., and the spreadsheets look all lovely. They're usually referring to cuts within a certain set of almost kind of historic parameters. There's Labour and the Conservatives, they rob a little bit from Peter to pay Paul. Largely, they've got the same pool of money there. They won't touch that area. They won't touch that area. They'll just take a little bit from here, a little bit from there and throw it all up in the air and hope that it sticks. Whereas what Reform are saying is actually that's been the problem. We're going to go harder and faster on this because we will touch things like net zero, like DEI, like all sorts of other initiatives. We'll take a water gun to the civil service, those jobs that have been there for 100 years and nobody can quite define who they are and what they do, etc. The Doge thing from the United States. They're taking it to a place that perhaps no other party has. With all of that in mind, George, is it possible then that Reform could achieve the successes of the Liz Truss type approach because they've got a very different way of finding the money to pay for it?
The problem is, I don't want to be churlish here, but this is a bit like the economics of the kindergarten, if you kind of get my drift. Because actually, a lot of the things that I heard being discussed in your previous package, like on net zero and, I mean, let's cut to the chase. The really big issues, we spend, I mean, from the point of view of the public sector, we spend and we raise revenues equivalent to about 800 or 900 billion pounds a year. And if you really want to make kind of an impact on the fiscal position and actually try to cut public spending, if that's what you want to do, remember Margaret Thatcher did it, and she did it in the face of opposition from lots and lots of people, including a famous letter that was written by 400 economists. I wasn't a signatory, I have to say, but she did it in a different time and in a different way. But if you're going to make real inroads into public expenditure, then you can't really skirt around the edges. If you want credibility with the public, I think people have to understand, and they want to understand, that you're really going to attack some of these big items. Now, part of the Labour Party's problem in coming to office was they boxed themselves in to the point where Rachel Reeves's options, both on the revenue side and on the spending side, were pretty limited. Now, that's not to say that you can't change it, but I think, you can't fool with people, all the time. You have to basically call a spade and say, this is what we're going to have to do. We can no longer afford these entitlements. We can no longer afford to do this. We need to, change the way in which we organise the tax system, and lots of difficult, awkwardly political decisions.
So Nigel Farage, just a final point, George, needs to go further if he wants
does.
to be taken seriously.
I mean, in a way, he's got it easy, because it's a bit like Brexit in a way. Brexit was never an argument about the economy. I mean, it was, but when people made up their minds in the voting booths as to whether they wanted to support it or not, the economy really wasn't the most important issue. Yeah. And I think here he's got it easy. In a way, because he's opposition, he could just, he can hurl out programs and say, I support this and I support that. And actually, what he's doing in the process is actually changing the nature of the economic and political debate over the next 3 or 4 years. Yeah. Whether or not he actually comes to power is kind of a different issue, but he will have an effect, I think, on the political debate in this country if he carries on in this vein.
George, great to have you on again with us. Thank you for your time. George Magnus, former UBS chief economist. So he would have to go, Farage would have to go deeper and harder on those cuts if you wanted to seriously make a dent. He's certainly going further than the Conservatives or Labour, but if it was about serious money, then you'd have to be a little more ambitious, even based on what Reform UK have set out. That's George's words. Who do you trust out of the two parties? And we're not talking about the Tories and Labour, we're talking about Labour and Reform. Of those two, who do you trust on the economy? 0344 499 1000.
They'd rather be around there waving rainbow flags and Palestinian flags and joining in and then catching real criminals. That poor old guy.
I know what they're doing. They're doing it by the book. Give us the knife. If you don't give us the knife, we will have to taser you. He's 92. He's got one leg.
Ridiculous.
It's just...
I think they need striking off, to be honest.
Well, they are going to come before a disciplinary board at the police where they'll be tried.
The poor man, and he's dead now. That's terrible.
It really is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk. This comes from Phil in response to tax cuts from Farage and Keith Starling opposing. Just by axing net stupid zero, it will cover the cost of Nigel's pledges. I don't think it does cover the cost just of that one. It will cover the cost of quite a lot. But then you would also be forced, and this is not an attack on cancelling net zero, the phrase itself doesn't do justice to what would be required to do that and therefore replace it. So you'd have to factor in the cost of what you're going to do instead. So there's that. But yesterday we learned that the £20,000 tax threshold would cost twice what net zero costs anyway. And that's just one promise, doesn't include two-child benefit issue or indeed winter fuel allowance. But as our last guest said, all this stuff is doable, but you'd have to make really fundamental changes, not just the attractive headlines. Angela is in Northamptonshire. What have you got, Angela? Good afternoon.
Hey, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Ange. What are you thinking?
Oh, I'm not in Northamptonshire. I'm in North Nottinghamshire.
Oh, yeah, North Nottingham. I do apologise. That's my bad. North Nottinghamshire.
What am I thinking? I'll tell you what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I'm a retired nurse, and I've got a very working class background.
Yep.
And I feel that I think that the country needs reforming. I'm just not convinced that the Reform Party is going to do it. I think him in charge, and I forget his name, I can't take him seriously because he's a career politician. I think most of it's based on...
Who, you're talking about Nigel Farage as a career politician?
That's the one. I mean, can
you think Nigel Farage... I mean, Nigel Farage is mostly known for kind of not being a career politician in the sense that he had a career before. He's not, he didn't go and work for an MP after university. He didn't do all of that stuff.
Oh, he went to university?
Yeah, he went to university,
really
yes.
know a lot about him,
but I mean, in the sense that, Keir Starmer...
Can I finish?
In a similar position. Well, I'm just responding to you.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
Oh, I totally get for Keir Starmer. I'm talking about Labour Party. I think the Tories are finished. I think it's the catch-up on Maggie Thatcher years when she destroyed all our industries and she made everybody in the country, or she told them it were all right to be greedy.
Well, she never said that.
She did. I was a roundup.
Well, but you've just made that up because you don't like the Tories, which I appreciate, But she never said it's all right to be greedy. She said it's all right for other people. It's all right for working.
A, B, C, and D.
Yeah, it's all right for working class people to get rich or to get. She didn't even say that actually. To be successful, to have some money for themselves.
Thank you for cutting me off. And,
I haven't cut you off, mate.
Trouble with it.
You've cut yourself.
Right. Well, journalism.
I think you might have cut yourself off.
Yeah. Okay. Sure, then.
Listen, do a little bit of research, Angela. Give us a call back when you've done it, and we can have a good conversation. Listen.
I can't, darling, because I've got a brain problem, and I'm just ringing to answer the question.
Yeah. No.
I've got no experience in politics, in government, and so.
Well, but neither did Keir Starmer have any experience in government.
The Labour Party
till he got there.
And what do you expect him to do?
So how do we do that then? Do we never have another political party based on the fact that they're new?
Well, who knows? I think it's about time that somebody in government actually represented what the people want.
Well, that's but Angela, that's what reforms say they are. They are the people's party.
Well,
they speak for you, Angela. I think you're a closet Nigel Farage fan.
Well, maybe I am.
There you go.
Maybe I am.
I think
reform. I think the country needs reforming. I just don't think the Reform Party is the people to do it.
OK, there it is, which is a completely democratic position. Thank you very much for that, even if you did decide to employ a bit of revisionism over the Conservative Party under Thatcher. That's fine. Everyone does it. It's almost still a national sport 50 years later. 0344 499 1000. Who do you trust in the economy, Labour or Reform? This one from Mike in Lincoln. If Nigel Farage were to give up all the space he's living in rent-free in Labour and the Tories' heads, we would likely house a week's worth of illegal immigrants at no cost to the taxpayer. Good point, Mike. Thank you very much indeed for that. Robert Jenrick's going to join us a little later. He's been doing his own bit of research, going out there sort of Louis Theroux style, catching the bad guys, dodging fares on the railways. It's a great piece of film. It certainly puts Sadiq Khan back in his box and sort of shows up his own leader to some degree. He joins us a little later in the programme. More coming from you. First, though, at 2 o'clock, let's get the latest news headlines.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome back. 3 minutes after 2 o'clock here at the home of Common Sense. So, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has attacked Nigel Farage's plans to reverse cuts to winter fuel payments and to lift the two-child benefit cap. He's warning the irresponsible splurge would be Liz Truss all over again. He says it will drive up mortgages, bills, and the cost of living. We'll have more on that. Great comments coming through from you as well. Also this afternoon, Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick has taken matters into his own hands, filming himself confronting fare dodgers on London's tubes, at one point asking if someone had a knife on them, warning their actions are chipping away at society. We'll speak to Robert Jenrick in the next section. And organised waste crime has reached record levels as crooks cash in on industrial scale fly tipping, which has been dubbed Britain's new county lines. And it's a right old mess out there. Maybe it's a job for Robert Jenrick. I don't know. Perhaps he could be the next on the case. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Great calls coming in. Stephen East Yorkshire says the Brexit was not a mistake. The mistake was trusting that our politicians would enact Brexit and take full advantage of the freedoms it afforded us. Unfortunately, they have wasted the opportunity and betrayed the voters. And of course, in recent weeks, Keir Starmer. It does bug me, by the way, when people say, oh, Brexit's been a disaster. I don't think you'd even know that or could begin to judge that until we'd had a clear, I'm tempted to say a decade. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg said 50 years at one point or something like that. But I think you would need a certain stretch of time. Remember, we've had COVID and everything that went from that and the economic ramifications, the lack of trade, industry, commerce that would have happened in those times, etc. So I don't really consider that anyone could make an accurate judgment over every dot and cross over Brexit at this stage. I genuinely don't think you could. I think it's way too early to be able to do that. And of course, people will pick and choose which bit of the headline suits their argument. The minute cheese exports are down, that's because of Brexit, right? Well, it could just be that some people aren't ordering cheese or whatever. But you take my point. Stats are bent around like Nadia Comaneci when it comes to how people will mould and apply them to their own argument. But yeah, I do think time still needs to be the biggest proof of where the Brexit vote took us. Let's talk to Oscar Redrup, former number 10 advisor to Boris Johnson. Afternoon to you, Oscar.
Afternoon, Ian.
Good to have you with us. I mean, just on that point, by the way, I mean, it's just politics, isn't it? If you voted for something, you will find your reasons, you will project onto those reasons every story you will see from a certain angle. And if you have the very opposite view, you will take exactly the same story with supposedly the same facts in your face, but you'll just mould it into a completely different opinion.
Yeah, and it's interesting how both sides of the political divide often can't see that they're the mirror image of each other.
Yes.
Occasions. Yeah. And they get het up in exactly the same way on the same issues, and yet they would criticise the other side for doing exactly that. And you see voters who are absolutely caught in the middle, and you see voters who, and actually most people, I mean, politicians are incredibly, obviously, it's kind of written into their job description, partisan. Most voters, interestingly, I think, and of course there'll be people who will always vote for the same party until the day they die, although that's changing more and more. Politics is getting more frantic. And actually sometimes I think they want less noise, they want less hyperbole, and they just want straight talk and common sense, which I'm sure will lead us on to Starmer's press conference today.
Well, indeed. And I said at the beginning and throughout the last hour, Oscar, I mean, it's kind of extraordinary that a Prime Minister with a 170 majority, I know there's some iffy stats behind that as well. But nonetheless, 170 majority would decide to cobble together a press conference to respond to a party that has 5 MPs, which shows you how the political terrain has profoundly shifted over the last, year or two.
It's completely fascinating. And if I was Farage, I'd have been watching that, rocked back in my armchair.
Yeah.
I know he likes a tipple and, you know, a cheeky cigarette from time to time, and I'd have been roaring with laughter.
100%.
And satisfaction. If that isn't, you know, the making, as you say, 5 MPs, if that isn't getting a majority government, a huge majority government, dancing and singing to your tune, then I not know what is. It was really interesting watching the media press conference questions, you know, stuff about living in his head rent-free, and people referencing, just as you have there, Ian, you know, you have this huge majority. You know, why are you almost running scared and insecure from as it stands, a minority party with 5 MPs? And it was really interesting hearing Starmer's responses. He couldn't do the human, and he couldn't do the human. Because this is the other thing, just to pare it back. If you're number 10 and you're deciding to do a day like today, you better be armed. You want to be front foot, you want to be confident,
100%.
You want to be aggressive, you want to be hungry. He was anything but today. And that's, I was genuinely quite, and I just said people don't like hyperbole, but I was genuinely quite shocked.
I was shocked, and he kind of, I think you're bang on here, Oscar. They'd obviously had a meeting, you know how these things work, and gone, right, let's do the Liz Truss card, because it sounds a bit Liz Trussy, what he's talking about. Let's talk about that, and that will work, without anyone seemingly around the table going, yeah, OK, do the Liz Truss card. However, if you do that, then these questions are going to come at you, not least, why are you even having this prayer? Why are you even dignifying the words of Nigel Farage? When you sit with a big majority and there's only 5 of them, etc. All of that would have been, you know, understandable, but it appears they didn't do that.
No, and the line itself I completely get it. It's really logical. I think there are a few 8-year-olds out there who would be able to say, oh, he's made some spending commitments. Let's hark back to the Liz Truss attack line that was so successful for us. One, things have completely moved on. The main thing being moved on is that now you are in power, and the economy that you are running is failing people currently. People don't feel better off. If you'd spent 2 years, and this is what my advice would be, keep Farage like an isolated little boy for the time being, on the naughty step. Don't give him don't give him the airtime that he requires. Spend 2 years, delivery. Because then, in 2 years' time, if the Labour Party are delivering on the economy and people do feel better off, then those attack lines of, do you want to trust this guy now we're delivering for you? You know, with his fantasy economics, as they put it, that rings true. That kind of works. But here and now, when people are looking, saying, well, I don't know why you're having a pop at Farage and how he'd run the economy, when the economy you're running is absolutely tanking.
Yeah.
It's really simple stuff.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? But we will watch with interest how this plays out. But you're absolutely right. You can see Mr. Farage sitting in a lovely leather wingback chair with a pint of fine bitter in his hand and a big old stogie in the other hand, and enjoying every single moment of it. Let's move to a man. By the way, what was also telling, I suppose, and you know, interesting about this, of course, is that this is. The Conservatives are not even in this conversation. This is, you know, Labour deciding to almost battle with Reform as if they were the opposition. Now, that might change because the man who, let's face it, we're going to speak to him a little later, that would really like to be the leader of the opposition, Robert Jenrick. He's a little bit more flavoursome, I think, to perhaps some of those sort of Reform wobble voters. But he's taken on a kind of a Louis Theroux thing, it seems, doing videos and trying to make some interesting points about aspects of life. In this case, and we're going to show a clip here. This is Robert Jenrick, he, of course, Shadow Justice Secretary, released a video on X showcasing the amount of people who jump the barriers, try to get free train fares, etc. Let's have a look at what he uncovered.
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? Do you want you want to go back and pay like everybody else? Do you think it's all right not to pay? Why don't you go back and pay? You can say off as much as you want. But everyone else has to pay. You're carrying a knife, do you say? Nearly 1 in 25 people using London's public transport aren't paying for it. So there's 8 officers down there, but 1 minute away, that gate's wide open. It's also just annoying watching so many people break the law and get away with it.
Or at least most of it.
Right, should we go over here to these guys here? Excuse me, gents.
Hello.
You're on camera, mate. You're bang to rights.
Just step to the side and...
All right, thanks very much, guys. It's the same with bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops. It's all chipping away at society. The state needs to reassert itself and go after lawbreakers.
It's a very effective, I think, top work, Oscar, from Jenrick on this one. It's a great narrative to kind of own. It's fabulous that he can go out there almost in a way that, I reckon most people who previously thought about Robert Jenrick, he's done a couple of other videos, but I think this is probably the most significant one. To have Jenrick in that capacity, to have him showcasing himself as almost a champion of common sense. That's him parking his tanks, not just on Reform's lawn a little bit, but on the leader of his own party's lawn. Would that be fair?
It was absolutely superb campaigning. I mean, this is what opposition is about. You have to be aggressive, you have to be hungry, and you have to go after things and be proactive. And we've seen a lot of criticism for what he's done today, but it's how the Conservatives would say it's the right kind of people who are taking exception for him being so front foot on this stuff. And that is the key to opposition. It's really, really admirable. He's tapped into something that I think a lot of people feel when they walk around life and they feel like I'm kind of unremarkably just doing the right thing, the normal stuff that you do as a member of society. And I feel like a bit of a mug because I'm watching people not do it.
Yep.
And for him to be so proactive and front foot, and the fact we're talking about it now, and let's face it, for a Conservative Party, Ian, I was saying this to a friend yesterday, the Conservative Party feels so out of touch and irrelevant at the moment that they're not even capable of annoying people. And, that's how far away from the conversation sometimes
it's a very good point. They're not even annoying people. And I just thought with the Jenrick thing there, he's gone, I thought at first it was Dog the Bounty Hunter, from that old cable show. I thought he was out there, a bit of Louis Theroux. I thought he just looked the part. He sounded very accessible. This could become his thing, right? I mean, if he did one of these a month, then, I think he would make substantial inroads, certainly into the minds of floating voters.
And you know what? I mean, people have taken exception with Rob and his kind of conversion, if you like, to the right, because he was always seen as a bit of a, relatively soft One Nationer.
Yeah.
But you have to admire the commitment that he has shown over the last couple of years now. And he clearly, any politician that is willing to put themselves on the line for something that they care about, and you sense that with him, you're like, you genuinely care about the state of this country at the moment. And you have to admire that. I mean, it'll be interesting when you interview him to ask about is he facing pressure internally in the party for just how eye-catching he's being? Is he overshining a little bit? But I think his response to that would probably be, well, the line he'll probably give you is, no, absolutely not. But even if behind the scenes he is, I don't care because I'm doing what I think's right. And you have to admire that.
Is he the next leader of the Tory party?
Look, he's right. I mean, he would be. He's obvious. He's the only one who's cutting through, isn't he? The thing I would say, just very, very quickly on that, is my old boss Boris, after he won 2021 in Hartlepool, feels like millions of years ago. Keir Starmer, 3 years out from the election, was thinking about resigning, and look what happened there. So Kemi still has a hell of a lot of time.
We will see. I think you're being very generous there, Oscar, but I'm sure we will revisit this particular point on future discussions. Let's have a look at this. I mean, it's not been a good role for Keir Starmer really since last July, frankly. There was never the honeymoon period, and it was one battle after another, and U-turns and changing minds and stuff I did say but didn't say, etc. And now we have this. I mean, this is the last thing he needs, the Chagos Islands deal, which, was flipping controversial from the off, whether it was James Cleverly that was trying to negotiate something or whatever the heck we ended up with under Labour. But now the unwelcome news for Keir Starmer is that China has backed the deal and said this is a great deal. Now, of course, one of the big hurdles and problems was that this is all about Mauritius. Mauritius are aligned with China, and right there is the problem. Quite simple politics, geopolitics to kind of get your head around. Not what Mr. Starmer wanted to hear.
It's almost it's a kind of a mic drop moment. I mean, if China are backing this deal, I mean, no further comment or argument, please. There was some polling done on it last week in terms of issue in terms of how it cuts through to the public, this Chagos deal, and surprisingly, maybe unsurprisingly, it's not one of the chief issues of the day. But what it speaks to, and if I was Reform, Conservatives, how I would frame this deal in terms of the minds of voters, it is that Keir Starmer does not have the British interest at heart. And I don't mean that because, not to just contradict myself, of course he does. I'm not saying he's and people do go over the top and say he's a traitor, and it's not that, but he doesn't understand the British interest. He may think he does, but ultimately he plays to a gallery, a more global gallery that doesn't understand what this means. And Rob Jenrick, again, can't believe I'm talking about it again, this deal is something that he has campaigned on, hugely over the last few months. And for it to get, it's stunning, for it to get the approval of China, which the fear everyone was raising.
Yes.
It's hilarious. And just quickly, Ian, we forget that the Labour Party, the Labour government, Starmer and Reeves, if I remember rightly, and I think it was maybe 8 months or so ago now, they had all those meetings. They went over, they had those conferences with Xi. And I mean, it makes you think.
100%. 100%. It does. Yeah, it's a really good point to finish on. Oscar, thank you, as ever. Oscar Redrop, he is former advisor to Boris Johnson when he was in number 10. It's a great point. It does make you wonder, those little powwows that Rachel Reeves and others had with the Chinese government, cozying up, some said, others more kindly was like, well, you've got to at least show that, you want them inside the tent rather than outside piddling away. I get that, but is there something more going on here? When China say, very good, the biggest question mark over this whole Chagos Islands thing, and let's face it, none of us have really done a PhD in this, but just looking at the cursory facts and figures around it, the biggest reservation was that this is a very dangerous move, and it's very dangerous because of that relationship between Mauritius, who, by the way, never owned the Chagos Islands, but have somehow become the chief beneficiary of it, and their relationship with China. And looking at the military and security implications of that particular territory, hence the reason why we were there, then that clearly throws up a massive question mark. And then China come along and say, yeah, this is great, Keir, we're giving it the thumbs up, it's a good deal. The usual rule of thumb, well, if China says it's a good deal, don't do it, right? Apparently not. Over to you in a few moments, 0344 499 1000. The Robert Jenrick story is getting a lot of traction as well. We'll take some comment on that too. And we'll speak to Mr. Jenrick in the next hour. And the question we began with, which was really about the interesting press conference that Mr. Starmer had this morning, having a pop at Nigel Farage, calling him the sort of Liz Truss 2.0. Do you buy into that? Who do you trust on the economy more? Would it be Keir Starmer or Nigel Farage? Labour or Reform UK? 0344 499 1000.
I appreciate that people who lose rapid amounts of weight without eating the correct vitamins and proteins and minerals are going to end up with osteoporosis, because obviously, you know, you need all these things. You need protein, and you need calcium, and you need vitamin D to keep your bones healthy. And what happens with these drugs is that it enhances your satiety. So basically, people just don't feel hungry.
Yeah.
So they tend to not eat the right foods.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Barry in Kenya, you don't often get that on a message. Barry, afternoon, Barry. He says, as a Reform voter, I would love Jenrick to move over to Reform. I would be worried that if he became Tory leader, that he would take a chunk of Reform's votes away. He's very impressive. And I wasn't really... I mean, this video thing he's done, and I'm not just basing it on this, but I think of late, the video piece he's done does show a very different... It not just shows a very different character, it shows a very different sort of emphasis. Kemi Badenoch could not do that. She could not do that. She was, as business secretary when she was at the dispatch box, you know she's super bright. Nobody disputes that. She brings a whole lot of elements to the party that you kind of need as a leader. I always argued she had more of the X factor than Robert Jenrick. Now, this is the wonderful thing about living in a democracy and politics, I think it's over to him. I think he's now got that ground. And these sort of little videos, I would seriously say, mate, you've got to do one of these once a month. If you do one, it doesn't look great, then don't release it. But if you're capturing that territory, the stuff that's annoying people, that puts you in a great position. And I would say, back to Barry in Kenya, I don't think he will become a Reform member, but I do think he will be the person that Reform can do business with in some shape or form. Let's go to Ben in Essex. What have you got for us, Ben? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear. Sounding great, Ben. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I like Reform. I like what Nigel Farage is saying. And do you know what? I quite liked Liz's Truss's views on things. I think, you know, having tax cuts, and didn't she have an energy support package or something? And
yeah, something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, all that's going to do is incentivise businesses, and that's what you need in a thriving economy, a more capitalist way of doing things. This Labour government just want to kill business, sit in their own comfort, socialist way of doing things. And, I mean, these people, I dare say, couldn't run an ice cream van.
No.
But if you want to bring more money into the economy, you need to emphasise business. At the moment, we've got no value proposition. In fact, it's terrible to set up a business in this country because you get taxed to the hills, and you're going to have more job losses, you're going to have more businesses going under, so then you won't have enough tax coming in.
Yeah.
So long term, we're doomed to fail.
I've never had so mmany conversations, Ben, with mates. I'm talking about working class people who work in everything from finance to building. You know, when people became self-employed, you know, they'd spent years working for a company and go, do you know, I'm going to go it alone. It was a badge of honour. It was a great thing to do. It was a bit risky, but a big release. Now, that whole conversation about being self-employed and starting your own business, I'm sure you're ahead of me here, Ben, it's like it's fraught with, you know, mates are saying, why am I bothering? You know, the taxation, the bureaucracy, the form filling. It's just a nightmare the rules and the regulations.
Exactly, because they don't like business. They don't want thriving business. And the thing is, the best countries, the best economies have always done better in a capitalist environment, whereas I get it, on paper it can look a bit harsh, but you need good supply and demand, and you need low tax, because you need that. When people are booming and they've got money in their pocket, they spend. When they spend, there's more money in the economy, so therefore there's growth. And you need to nurture that and let that happen naturally, instead of this red tape. And, you know, we can't allow people to do this and do that, because you don't get... nothing thrives. And what we also lack as well is the creativity, the entrepreneurs, the people that come up with ideas and create things. And this is what this country used to be great for. At the moment, what are we great for? And they're killing that. Yeah. They should have let Liz Truss stay in. I mean, I know we've got a different government now, but she would have come round Liz Truss and it would have worked.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, there are people there, lots of economists as well, that say, you know, if you'd have given this time, it might have been a different approach. It wasn't without its risks, but look at the state we were in anyway. So, you know, take a risk or two. And if you'd have allowed it to come to fruition, it might well have, you know, done something. But by that stage, the markets got spooked and the whole thing fell apart. So you think Farage could handle things better than... I know that sounds like a daft question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think my little boy could handle things better than Labour, but you take the point. Could Farage, I mean, seriously, get the economy running, save some money and employ, you know, that kind of capitalist approach to growth and success that this country desperately needs?
I really like to think that he would. I mean, he's got my vote, and I think we do need change, and hence we need reform in the sense that we do need this change, because what the Conservatives and Labour have done, all their policies have been heading towards killing businesses, overtaxing and making it too hard for people. And the ripple effect of that means that the public sector, I mean, you could go on and on about this, Ian, about the DEI stuff and the over-regulation and this and that. But yes, I do think if he stands by his word and does what he says, I do believe we'll have a better Britain, and it needs to happen.
Good work, Ben. Thank you very much indeed. That's Ben in Essex. This one comes in from Mark. Ask Jenrick why all this crime on the trains happened exactly the same under the Conservatives for 14 years. He's not kidding anyone. Nobody trusts him or the Tories. Goodbye Tories forever, says Mark. Well, in fairness, you could say that London is a fairly sort of autonomous place when it comes to TfL, the Mayor of London. This has largely been, over most of that time, Labour administration. Sadiq Khan has been there for 2 and a bit terms. A long time. He's responsible for police and crime. He's responsible for TfL. It's, you know, in this particular area, you could reasonably say that this has been a Labour problem more than a Tory problem. In terms of the wider picture, Mark is quite right. A lot of the stuff that's going absolutely pear-shaped at the moment is not new to Keir Starmer. Well, it's new to Keir Starmer. It's not new since Keir Starmer arrived. But I guess Jenrick and others will go, well, what point are you allowed to come into the conversation and say, no, I've got a different view on this? Well, Jenrick is a man that's made that conversion, not quite Reform UK, but what he would call a real Conservative. We'll speak to him later about his latest endeavours down there on the London Underground. One here doesn't give a name. All too often we hear that Brexit has been a disaster. From what I can see, our trade with the EU is up on pre-Brexit periods. The NHS got their 350 million quid a week uplift. It's allowed us to do trade deals with India and the US, to name but two. So when another Ramona comes up with this claptrap, can we ask them to qualify? Do you know, it's not just... And this really kills me, because I loathe people not playing nicely. And I always think that even if you have a totally different view, you've got to argue with the facts. I hear people wheel out, well, Brexit has been a disaster, as a matter of fact, not as a matter of, well, I think we could have done better if we'd have... Not that, no. It's almost, as we all know, Brexit has been a disaster. As we all know, really? I don't think that doesn't really reflect... I don't think where we're at the moment. There's lots of issues, there's lots of areas that need attending to. That's a bit of an ongoing battle, isn't it, when you're running a country? But it's the kind of casual, dead cert approach that Remainers have to that argument. Well, we all know it. Man alive, how often can I read that? Thank you very much for that last message, whoever... Oh, it's from Neil, I think. Yes, Neil, thank you. 0344 499 1000. More calls and comments coming up in just a couple of moments' time. And we're going to be speaking as well in a moment about fly tipping. That's a biggie on the agenda. If you've been the victim of it, had it dumped on your lawn, yard, driveway or wherever, we're all ears at this end. 2:30, this is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. We'll come back to your messages and the like in just a bit. If you want to call us on any of the subjects, you know the number. You can leave a voice note there as well. So let's move to this story. Organised waste crime has hit record levels, with gangs dumping mountains of rubbish in plain sight, no longer hidden down the viaduct. This is happening in broad daylight. The Environment Agency says it's costing the UK £1 billion a year, with 34 million tonnes of illegal waste. The West Midlands is the worst hit, as fly tipping on an industrial scale is dubbed Britain's new county lines. In a moment, we'll speak with Kevin Richards, who's a victim of fly tipping. But first, Mo Metcalfe-Fisher, Director of External Affairs at the Countryside Alliance. Mo, good afternoon to you. The Countryside, of course, is a very typical place, not exclusive, but it's a very typical place where often you're driving through a beautiful country road on one of those nice Sunday afternoon drives, and there's a lovely field of sheep, and the verdant land of the countryside of Britain is there on the other side. And then suddenly, man alive, there's 17 soggy mattresses and God knows what else just dumped at the side of the road. Not uncommon and a growing problem.
Yeah, it is. Good afternoon, Ian. Good to see you as always. Yeah, no, it is a massive problem, and it's causing absolute mayhem for farmers whose land is often the place where that rubbish ends up. And by the way, they have to pay for that removal themselves. It's quite different when it's on public land. The council have a responsibility, as it were, to move that away. Look, I think the comments about new county lines are significant. I think they're true. I agree with that. This is, after all, organised criminal activity. You know, when we think about fly tipping, we're not just talking about someone chucking a cigarette butt out the window, or some dodgy mattresses or magazines, whatever. It's serious organised crime. And these criminals, like all criminals, know what they're doing. It's their trade. They know how to get around the rules. If a CCTV camera appears in a country lane, they're just going to move to a different country lane.
Of course.
It's becoming increasingly hard to clamp down on them.
And it's a very easy crime, isn't it, really, Mo? I mean, it's not, you stick an ad saying, don't worry, we'll get rid of your stuff. And, I'm sure back in the day, customers might have been a bit suspicious when a fella with a knackered old van shows up in the driveway. But I get the impression that they've kind of put a veneer of legitimacy onto some of their operations now. It looks like you really have called the real guys, and out they come, and little do you know, it's being dumped half a mile round the corner.
Yeah, and of course, if that happens, you, like the criminal, are also liable. You yourself are committing a criminal offence, and you can find yourself in court, and it routinely happens. Look, we have a responsibility to make sure that the waste collectors that we're using are legitimate. And it's actually really easy to find out if they've got the correct permits. You can just do it, just Google waste licence checks on the gov.uk website, and you will get there, and you can find out very quickly. And another thing to look out for, I remember during COVID, I don't remember it, it's just so bad. Fly tipping was out of control. Councils were being a bit draconian with the opening times. The clipboard warriors were having a joyous time. And it meant that more and more people were turning to these dodgy collectors. And that's hanging over. But as I say, making sure that the public realise it's kind of their responsibility too is really important in this.
100%. And it's a growing problem. What is the answer to the problem, though, Mo? Because as you rightly say, sticking some CCTV up is not going to stop these guys. It's very easy money as well. There's very little outlay. You're running a van or a truck, and that's kind of it. You take your cash in hand, couple of £100, and away you go, probably with iffy number plates on the back. So how do we even begin the process of solving this?
Well, I don't know if you saw recently here, but the government were talking about deploying drones to track down these people. Again, a drone, it's a fairly useful deterrent, but again, how does a drone know where to go? We're talking miles and miles of open countryside and shrubbery, which will enable these people to go undetected. Again, I think it goes back to what I was talking about us, about our responsibility. Starve them with access to the cash, and don't allow them to have a market for it. When you're online and you see a deal that looks too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. You know, there are serious professional men and women that do this as a job. You can find their details online, use them. Don't risk it, because you could find yourself in court.
Indeed. Mo, thank you, as ever. Mo Metcalfe-Fisher, Director of External Affairs at the Countryside Alliance. And I know one of the other issues around this is that, you know, it's sometimes cheaper to give somebody 50 quid to take away your fridge, freezer and your bed rather than giving the council 80 quid for the same service. So there's a little bit of that going on here. Happens in different ways as well. I mean, I lived at a place where they did dump stuff. It was a shared kind of block of apartments, if you want to call it that, or flats, as we used to say in the old days, with a driveway, and you had to go around the back of the driveway. It was way down the side of the house, out of the view of the road. Wake up one morning, or come home one afternoon after waking up one morning and seeing a van drive down there, which I thought was part of doing some work, and then returning later with the other residents, realising they dumped a load of stuff there. So there's the stuff that just gets let go off the back of a van on a motorway. That happens down the viaduct. So it could be your property. It could be your business. It works in so many different ways. Let's speak with Kevin Richards, who's been on the receiving end of this, I understand. Kevin, good afternoon to you.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. And this has been going on in my area for more years than I can ever care to remember, and it's just getting worse.
What's happening? What's been your experience here?
Right. I live in an area called Erith, and there's a road called Ray Lamb Way, Erith, Kent, DA82JZ. And it's like a country lane, and both sides of the lane is a dike, which people have told me when they were children, they used to go down this Ray Lamb Way, go fishing for newts and everything in the dikes. But now you can't do it because whatever's in there, it's so full of rubbish, waste. Every living creature is totally dead. You know, there's no living life there at all.
So this has become a well-known area that people still dump stuff, and they have done for years.
Yeah, it's been going on for at least 20 years or more.
Wow.
I've been onto the council. I've been on Facebook. I've already been on your programme once before about it. And basically, everyone passes the buck. They don't want to know. And like last night, there was one instance, a middle-aged gentleman in a little black van, which I think was a Citroen Berlingo. I'm not too sure. I didn't get the reg number, but all of these little vans look the same to me. And he was at 6:15 yesterday evening, emptying black bin bags out of his van into the dike. And I've been told numerous occasions, when I see this, I should stop and tell him. But another story about London. There's so much knife crime, acid being thrown in people's faces and that. Is it worth me risking my life just to tell someone, do not throw a bag of rubbish out?
100%. And you don't know whether that person's going to tell you just to F off or whether they're going to pull a blade out. I mean, that's the that's the reality of the situation. I guess the police would probably say, look, some of this might be organised crime, so don't even go near. I mean, they're not Tony Soprano, but they are people that would use violence, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I drive all around southeast London and North Kent, and I go down all types of roads, side roads, main roads, housing estates, industrial estates, you name it, I'm down there. And this Ray Lamb Way in Erith is the worst hit road for dumping waste. It's so bad. The last 4 or 5 days, the rubbish has overflowed from the dikes, and it's actually in the road itself. And once, 2 years ago, driving down there in the dark, because I go down there 3 or 4 times a day in my own vehicle, and I actually drove over the rubbish, and I've damaged my own vehicle, and it cost me £450 to repair my vehicle for someone dumping their waste. And I've spoke to people, residents, and in the local area, and they get foreigners normally knock on the door saying, have you got any rubbish to take? We'll take it for 40 quid. And luckily, most of the people I talk to are sensible enough not to accept their offer. They would rather pay a skip company or rubbish removal company, pay them twice the amount of money, and then they know it's either going to landfill, recycling or somewhere. It's not going to be took down this Raylan way and damned. There is CCTV cameras there, which you've mentioned, but from government or the council, whoever's putting them up, spend thousands of pounds on these cameras, and then they come down and vandalise them so they can't, don't work.
Of course. It's as straightforward as that. Listen, Kevin, thank you for your time. I can hear the exasperation, the futility of trying to do something about it as well. Kevin Richards, who knows all about it from his own neck of the woods, his own area, his own patch. What do you do when you see somebody dumping that stuff? I mean, there are some really interesting videos online. You can see loads of them on YouTube of people confronting a fly tipper. But they're usually it's a family sometimes. Family have decided to open the back of their car and just put it on the side of the road. You think, sometimes, have you ever noticed it? Sometimes it's not even stuff that you would have to pay the council to get rid of. Some of it's just like a load of bin bags. Might have done a bit of work at home that weekend and you've got extra rubbish. You've got 10 bin bags where normally you'd have 1 or 2. And so I'll put it in the car. I know what I'll do. I'll put it in the car. I'll drive down to the A21 and I'll stop in the labour and I'll just drop it off there. I'll do that. That's okay, isn't it? I mean, what point does your brain not go, not only is that not okay, it's filthy, it's disrespectful, it's not pleasant for your fellow human beings, it's not right for your fellow taxpayer. And it just makes you just the worst, lower than a drop curb, for God's sake. I mean, what's wrong with those people? So that's just punters doing it because they can't be bothered to either go down to the council tip, and we've all got one of those, a royal pain they can be, but we've all got one, or just put your rubbish out for the bin men at the end of the week. So there's that, but then there's the more organised stuff, which is the fella that comes round with the van and says, I'll take your stuff. And I think that's latterly, as Kevin, our last guest, just suggested, a lot of these people are even knocking on doors now. And I've had it when we've had a skip on the driveway, and a fella came round. This happened all the time. You know, if you want to get rid of a radiator, for example, you don't need to do anything other than just put it at the end of your driveway, as if it's waiting to be collected by the council, because probably by 6 p.m. in the evening, it'll be gone. As people drive around just looking for this stuff, particularly metal. We had a skip in the front, in the drive, and I walked out there. There's a fella going through it who looked at me as I came out the door. And so there were 2 of them, actually, but one was really sifting. And I went, are you all right? And he went, yeah, you're all right. And I thought, yeah, that's not really how this works. It wasn't a general social inquiry. What I was really saying is, what the are you doing in my garden going through my skip? Now, their mentality is, well, it's a skip, right? You're throwing all this stuff out. Yeah, but you're still kind of... You would ask, you'd knock on the door, and I did say something slightly unpleasant to this fella, and a bit of a risk, because he was a bit bigger than me, and I'm pretty sure he could have probably knocked me down quite quickly. But what I sensed was, these people have no communication skills, no sense of dignity or decorum on how this stuff. So they're probably just used to it. And if I'd have walked out with a stick, he'd have probably gone, "You're all right, I'm going." It was really weird. It was the casual way that he just sort of thought, "You're right, mate. That's all right, mate. You're in my flipping garden, you turnip. Get out. I want to take that horrible bike we've just thrown out with you." I didn't say that. That would have been helpful looking back at it. He would have cleared the skip for us. 0344 499 1000. If you've been there, seen it, done it, got the T-shirt, been on the receiving end, all ears at this end. We'll carry on talking about reform and Labour after that extraordinary press conference from Keir Starmer today, cobbling it together for the country's journalists just to have a pop at Nigel Farage, which would have made Mr Farage feel rather good if they're somehow ticking those kind of boxes and agitating the government of the day. And Robert Jenrick and his endeavours to highlight fare dodgers and other unsociable activities. We'll talk to him a little later too. 0344 499 1000. Oh, and also a brand new Voice of Doom coming next on Talk.
One of the things that a lot of people don't realise about cannabis, that excessive use can produce psychosis.
Yeah.
So we do get quite a lot of incidents within London of psychopathic behaviour of people who are extreme cannabis users. So there is some truth in the fact that it's a damaging drug.
Yeah, I think that's a massive issue that's often overlooked. People think of it as just some sort of, just a few people sort of sitting around smoking dope. It's not. That's certainly not the kind of drug that a lot of people are using.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 10 to 3, so we've got a brand new Voice of Doom. This is the mystery voice with a political angle to it. It's usually a politician, past or present. Usually past, because present would be too easy. So it's a brand new one as well. I haven't heard this yet. I know who it is, but I haven't heard it. So have a listen. Who do you think this is?
Vote for us.
Oh, that was snappy. That was... Dave put that together earlier, which was... I mean, Dave's got a lot of... Sorry, that's not true. Dave's got very limited on his ambitions in this area of audio, but nonetheless, he's come up with a beauty here. Here it is again.
Vote for us.
Who is that? I know who it sounds a bit like, but it's not. If you think you know, 87222 is where you will find us, 87222. Or, of course, no, you can't call. Don't call. Whatever you do, don't call, because we haven't got a prize. But if we get a right answer, we will reveal who it is after the headlines at 3. Here it is again.
Vote for us.
One more time.
Vote for us.
87222. Back to your calls. Ronald is in Windsor. Ronald, how are you doing?
I'm all right, Ian. I think we had the Voice of Doom this morning, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it was speaking in I think it was in St Helens, this morning.
St Helens.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I was going to say was, do you think that the way they're performing Labour, and now that they are, to use Dennis Skinner's word of old, frit, do you think that it will add percentage points to Reform's polling?
After Starmer's thing this morning?
Yeah.
Well, I think it will firm up what Reform supporters already thought, and that is that they are clearly making inroads into the gut. If the Prime Minister of the day has to call a press conference on your press conference, then they've got a problem. That's how they would see it, and therefore they're doing something right.
Yeah, I mean, basically they were trying to attack how they're going to fund all these policies.
Yeah.
I think just by cancelling a lot of things that Labour have done, it would probably cover most of the costs, don't you think?
Yeah, well, you're right. It will cover a lot of it. I mean, I do think, and I don't blame Reform for this, that when you're in opposition, there's a lot you can say without having to prove it, right? Because at that point, you've got another 4 years yet before there's an election. And then, of course, if you win, you've then got to keep by your word. An economist told us earlier, not sure if you heard it, Ronald, but, he said that they'd probably have to go a bit further. They probably have to go harder and, in areas that might be uncomfortable for many people. I don't know where, he didn't refer to where, but that's usually how it works, he said.
Do you think that the nearer that they get to an election, Labour will even lose more support?
Yeah. I do, because I know it's 4 years away, and people go, look at the things that have happened in the past that we thought were unthinkable. Boris Johnson got an 80-seat majority. Unthinkable that he wouldn't be there for the next 10 years, let alone 5, and he didn't make 2, or just barely. So things that you think might not happen can happen. But I do think with Starmer, I think the rot has set in. I don't see it going away.
No, it won't go away, and people won't forget, and they won't forgive.
No.
And I just believe that the nearer you get, people. He has delusions of adequacy, doesn't he, Starmer?
Yep.
And I think the nearer you get to an election, people then have to make that jump or that decision. And I think, based on what's happened so far, that people will jump ship.
Yep. I think you're right. I think there'll be more of that. Ronald in Windsor, thank you very much indeed for your call. Will Jenrick be the man to neutralise this current situation? We'll speak to him a little later on his latest endeavours. Let's go to Matt in Cheshire. What have you got for us, Matt? Afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon, Ian. As usual, I've just wrote a few things down.
Yeah, good.
Fantasy economics from the man who endorsed Corbyn's magic money tree. Attacking Farage 4 years before an election just shows how desperate and truly pitiful Labour's strategy and advisers are.
Mm-hmm.
In a half-iron shirt, sleeves rolled up, in a grey Bill Clinton parody, his belly hanging over his belt, the most pathetic, wooden, empty politician of our lifetime, dishes out the warnings of quangos and Labour supporting financial bodies. Nobody cares. Nobody is listening. You've lost already. We saw with Trump the spite and relentless attacks only embolden more people to vote for him. Labour generally are beyond useless, incapable of even, I can't even read that part, seeing the obvious, too gutless to stand up for the British, for Britain, too vindictive to change. And finally, let's not ever forget, the Treasury control the Conservative and the Labour Party. So they've no right to judge anybody on what they say about economics.
And it's a great point to finish on, Matt. Thank you very much indeed on that. Yeah, the Treasury will always go, well, you've got this much money, so how do you want to spend it? You can do what you like. We're just the Treasury, but yeah. But the Chancellor, who will then be the one distributing that money, will have the hard task as out of the Home Secretary. Well, I can only give you it's an absolute right royal mess. And I do think what our economist a little earlier said was bang on, and that is that you're going to have to probably go a little deep. I don't know where you go. What do you lose? Where do you lose it from? You could look at the health service and say there's got to be a better way of doing this. It doesn't mean it's going to be a cheaper way. You could look at international aid and save yourself 10 billion or whatever it is there. But even that's not going to fundamentally touch the sides of what you would call seismic reform. There will be a veneer of change, not seismic reform. Horatio says, Ian, enjoying the show. Regarding Labour versus Reform, I don't think Reform will be learning anything from two-tier Keir. The likes of Nigel Farage and Richard Tice have run successful businesses. The front Labour bench couldn't run a bath. Absolutely bang on. Absolutely spot on. And James Cox says, I hope Robert Jenrick can visit some supermarkets and convenience stores next week and highlight the blatant shoplifting. Maybe also highlight the fact that security guards are unable to intervene. Maybe if the culprits were detained and then handed over to the police for immediate prosecution, we could tackle this stain on Britain. Thank you for that, James. Yes, I mean, that would be a great area. Well, I'll ask him if he's got any other sort of plans to highlight stuff. My thinking on this, from Jenrick's perspective, is about the sort of PR of it and the identity, if you like, the image of him in the minds of the public from a sort of fairly quiet, unassuming man. Could he, without going Ed Davey and going down a water flume or whatever, could he find himself, yeah, this is a serious guy that gets it, he understands it. Nigel Farage is not the only man or the only kid on the block who gets it. Mr. Jenrick's got a body of work to that kind of thing. You know, it's so much of it is about the optics. So much of it is about that now. So the unlikely kind of political rising star, could it be Robert Jenrick? Find out more in the next section. Loads to come after 3 o'clock, including him, as well as, of course, and I'm hoping we get a winner on The Voice of Doom. Have a listen to the voice.
Vote for us.
It's very short, very sweet. But who the heck is it? Don't phone in, but you can message in 87222 if you think you know. And hopefully we'll tell you on the other side of the news at 3 o'clock, which is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is the Afternoon Empire. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the home of common sense. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick has taken matters into his own hands, filming himself confronting fare dodgers on the tube down in London. At one point, even asking somebody if they had a knife on them, warning their actions are chipping away at society. We'll speak to him later in this hour. Also this afternoon, Donald Trump's global tariffs have been ruled illegal by the court, but the US president is vowing to fight back with the White House declaring a national emergency. We'll speak to our man on Capitol Hill later on. And Keir Starmer, as you've been hearing, has attacked Nigel Farage's plans to reverse cuts to winter fuel payments and, of course, to lift the two-child benefit cap. He's warned that the irresponsible splurge would be Liz Truss all over again. This was Mr. Starmer speaking in St Helens this morning. He says it will drive up mortgages, bills and the cost of living. More response on that. But who do you trust in terms of the economy? Is it Labour or Reform? 0344 499 1000. Just before we cross to Washington, shall we do the voice of doom? The political mystery voice bit. This was the voice we played you just before the news.
Vote for us.
Oh, that's very short. Do you know, it sounds a little bit like Keir Starmer, doesn't it? Can we hear it again, Dave?
Vote for us.
There it is. Here's some of the guesses. Lord Adonis, no. Rupert Lowe, no. Keir Starmer, there it is, no. Lord Flashheart, no. Ken Livingstone, it is not. Neil Parish, no. David Thorpe, it is not. But despite our technical producer Dave's best endeavours to come up with the most cryptic mama of a voice of doom ever, it has failed because we have a winner. Vaughan in Shropshire correctly identified David Steele. Is he still around, David Steele? I'm guessing he's still around. He must be like 157. 87, I've just been told. There you go. This is research on the hop. Of course, he was one of the reasons many people remember David Steele was not because they might have been in love with the Liberal Party or David Steele, was through Spitting Image, because when Spitting Image was on, it was the two Davids, wasn't it? David Owen and David Steele, that were just brilliant puppets, and the satire around that was just amazing. It's the kind of thing that got me interested in this world in the first place, watching. I got more from Spitting Image than I got from the news at 10 when I was a bit younger. So, yeah. That was the answer, David Steele, which means we have a brand new Voice of Doom tomorrow. That's 3 on the bounce, I think, that have gone. Bang, bang, bang. Another one, 2:45 on the programme. Now, Donald Trump is expected to appeal a court ruling blocking his sweeping import tariffs. Judges say he overstepped his authority, dealing a bit of a blow to his America First trade strategy. The decision adds uncertainty to global trade. That includes, of course, trade between us and the US. Let's speak to our man over there at the Hill. He is Michael Graham, US political commentator, managing editor at Inside Sources. I mean, it was always going to sort of go in this direction, wasn't it, Michael, to start with? This is just, if you like, battle one for Donald Trump. He's been there before. He's going to win, isn't he?
Look, I don't know if he's going to win in the courts. I mean, that's the decision. He was given an option up front. You can declare an emergency, and then a court will eventually decide if there's an emergency or not. Or you can try to go use the tools the president has that take more time, and you go through the trade process. You make a notice to the World Trade Organization and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And shockingly, Trump lacked the patience to wait for the process and said, let's go cleat. I know, it's so out of character for him, but he decided to let's go cleats high. And cleats high, that's an American expression. Anyway. So that's what he's done. And he's going to fight his way through court. But meanwhile, he's going to keep putting the pressure on our foreign trading partners. They know what's coming. And some of them are going to do what the UK did and say, let's try to come to accommodation that's more of a win-win. And others are going to fight the entire time.
Now, of course, I hear people say, well, you know, executive orders, you can use that. Right. But, of course, there's got to be, one would assume in a democracy, there's got to be a limitation on an executive order, isn't there?
So, for example, he can say the federal government will not purchase products from China. He can say that because he runs federal government. If he wants to tell me I can't buy a product from China, then you've got to have legislation or some other process. And so that's where he is. He wants to change the rules for trade. And part of this goes back to one of my ongoing complaints. Nothing against Great Britain, wonderful place, love visiting there. My search for the ultimate fry-up continues. But I would never want to live in your hellhole. And I'm kidding. I would never want to live under your parliamentary system. I hate your parliamentary system. I don't like the idea that one side wins everything, And then they just do whatever they want, and then the other side wins, and then they do, what they want.
Yes.
And we intentionally have this. Maybe you win the Congress, but you don't have the White House. And even if you have the White House, what about the courts? And so I like the spreading the power around. Well,
and
Congress has
the
abandoned
state and federal thing as well, which
and then of course the states have a lot of power. Exactly, that's a great point. Congress has abandoned its job and is acting more and more like a parliament. When Obama was in power, Democrats said, whatever Obama wants. We don't care about the rules. We don't care about defending our power as senators, whatever you want. Trump's empowered Republicans. Yes, sir, Mr. Trump. I don't want that. I want Congress to be its thing and the White House to be its thing. And on trade, that's become particularly, clear that Congress has no interest in doing its job.
Yeah, and that was my first thought when I saw that. I thought, well, what about Congress? Where are they in all of this? Because that would clearly be...
We could pass a law. I would love to have like a debate in Congress to say, look, here's what we're going to do. Screw China. I'd be totally cool with that. Yeah. And here's how we're going to make the rules. Our friends like the UK... We're going to have great deals. China and their allies, we're going to have lousy deals. We're going to do everything we can to empower non-China countries. We're going to do that. I'd love to have that debate and pass a law and confront China, government to government. Instead, you have a guy, Donald Trump, saying this is what we're going to do. And their attitude is, dude, you're out of here in less than 4 years, no matter what. Well, we'll get by. And that's why I don't like it. Same thing with Iran. President Obama would not bring the Iran deal for a regular vote. They did this trick vote to avoid a vote because he knew we couldn't get a majority of senators to back it. Go back and get a deal you can get a majority for. It'll be a better deal. Instead, what have we done? On again, off again, on again, off again, blah, blah, blah. We need more. The process is important. And just trying to evade the process, as Trump's trying to do on trade, it rarely works out.
Yeah, and I know that, Americans like yourself, Michael, you hold this very dear because it's very central to your sort of ideology. One of the finest examples I ever had of that, you mentioned the UK Parliament, but let's widen it to just the sort of UK system. I was at a party once talking to an American who could not quite get his head around the idea that the government kind of pick your doctor. Exactly. Rather than you pick your doctor. And he said, to run this past me again, you pick it. So what's it? So we had this conversation for about half an hour, and he goes off and gets a drink and a sausage roll or something. Then he comes back with his wife, and he says, tell her what you just told me. And so I explained it again, and she looked as if I'd just killed her dog when I imparted this thing. Half an hour later, he's back with his brother. Hey, come on. Hey, Limey, tell him. Exactly. The government picker, he could not fathom that could be a thing. Why would you allow a politician you've never met, probably didn't even vote for, with the personality of a newt to decide who your doctor was? And afterwards, I came away thinking, do you know what? I think he's right about this. He's got a point. I mean, they have kind of slightly changed the system a bit now, but yeah.
So my encounter with that is I used to be a regular on an Irish radio station. They would bring me over for debates and whatnot. And I was in this debate with this woman who hated the American system for healthcare because doctors got rich. And she said it should be a law that no doctor can earn more than 100,000 pounds a year or yen or whatever I forget what they are, shamrocks. And so I said, you're crazy. I said, let me see how it works in America. If you can figure out how to fix my brain, if you can stick a knife in my brain and save my life, I want you to make more money than anybody. Because what you're doing is so important. The idea that you're going to have a country full of doctors who aren't allowed to earn more than a car salesman, screw that, no way. I want people who are really good at saving lives and make lots of money. Yeah. And she just completely could not comprehend that idea.
Well, I remember, I may have told you this story before, but on the health front as well, an ex-girlfriend of mine she was a Texan, she was from America.
By the way, it's very easy to believe that you have ex-girlfriends.
Yeah, I know.
That's the easy part is the ex part. That is
who would leave this?
There's going to be a line of those.
And she was saying to me, she had some headaches and she was going to the doctors over here and she went back about, 20 times and then eventually said, oh, we might have to kind of scan you. She said, if I was in America, I'd have gone down to my local medical centre down the road and the first thing they would have done would have been, they'd have said, you need to go for a scan, not in another town, it would be in the room over the corridor because there's a machine in there. Why do I pay a bit more for my health care? Because that guy's got machines that go ping at the right times. And, you know, there's the difference. And, there's some fundamentally uncomfortable medical outcomes for Brits when they look at the American system, because it's often used as a kind of totemic way of the last thing we want to do is this. And I know there's difficulties with your system. There's difficulties with all systems. However, you know, the idea that none of it works, because it clearly does. And, you know, maybe it is more expensive in some areas, perhaps not as expensive in other areas, but the outcomes for many are actually better.
So one of the things I think the Brits have trouble understanding about America, that is a fundamental difference we can't change, is we're just such a bleeping big country with such a wide difference in people.
Yeah.
I mean, the people you meet in the rural South, my father, who's not like 100 years old, he grew up in a house that didn't have indoor plumbing because it was so rural.
Yeah.
And then, so my in-laws were both Jewish people from urban areas, and they don't believe him when he says that, because their lives were the life of someone in downtown New York is so different from the life of Montana. And then you have the ethnic differences. The fact is that ethnic groups have different biological, healthcare outcomes. I mean, sickle cell anemia is the obvious point. But my point is, if you grow up rural and you're African American and you have the Southern diet that I grew up on, that's a very different, medical issue for your entire 80-year life than it is, once again, from someone who's a suburbanite, who's a vegan, yada, yada.
Sure.
We have all that in one country. And so you're never going to have the kind of price efficiency that you theoretically could have. Now, obviously, your system stinks because the government runs it, so it's never going to be good. But even from a price efficiency standpoint, we're limited. We're just going to have waste, or we're going to have to cut off care, which is the model you guys use. And Americans will not accept rationing care. So to have that hospital in rural Mississippi that has the equipment you're talking about just costs a lot of money. And that's why our per person healthcare cost is higher than yours, because we are not prepared to ration care. And that's where we are.
I mean, you have to kind of do fundraising events to buy a heart monitor in some place. I mean, I appreciate that, it's great. And people rattle tins, for the children's hospital. You think, that's kind of like, please, sir, have you got spare a pound? We're raising some money for the sick kids. It's kind of like some sort of Victorian thing, but that's sort of how it works. There's lots of it. And of course, most people would say, when you get the NHS at its very best, then it's great. It's fabulous. And, I remember a couple of years ago walking into a hospital just round the back from here and thinking, this is brilliant. I paid my national insurance, but I don't. Beyond that, no one's going to ask me for money. I'm going to walk in. I'm about to see a very senior consultant. He's going to be really good. And, and I'm only going, by the way, for a third-year checkup on something.
Sure,
which was never major in the first place. And yet I've gone back for 3 years. They invite me. They call me and say, come back. And back I come. I get my letter and I show them the letter. And in I go and I sit chatting to this consultant who, by the way, I think he quite liked me, if you know what I mean. So maybe that's why I kept getting the letters. I don't know, but he was very good. And I thought, this is fantastic. This is brilliant. However, it's very easy to fall through the cracks when you don't get the letters and you need them. And the onus is being on the state to do that, not on you.
Right. And meanwhile, what we have in the United States is the cost of our care for dental care and for LASIK, people have had eye surgery.
Yep.
That's a lot fewer people have insurance for that. So you don't have the third party payer issue, which is I get what I want, someone magically pays for it, and I get a bill every month for my health insurance.
Yep.
I pay my premium, whatever. Because it's cash to cash, we have amazing dental care and amazing. You can get LASIK now for like $17. You get a tank of gas and they give you LASIK, because price competition has caused the quality to go up and the price to come down. You talked about scans. In the early days of body scan machines, Florida, because they had a deregulated healthcare office, people were opening scan clinics. It was so much cheaper to have a scan done. People were flying from New York to Florida to get the scan done.
Wow.
Because the plane ticket and the scan was cheaper. And then they could go, spend a day on the beach.
Of course.
And so the more you can put what I want and what I pay for it close to the product itself, whatever it is, whether it's healthcare or candy, you're going to get better products at a lower price. And that's the NHS fundamental failing. You guys have separated that so much. You'll never, ever fix it. You'll have to accept acceptable bad. And you can argue, well, America is acceptable bad because it's very expensive. I agree. Our acceptable bad is we pay more. But, man, do we get great care.
I tell you what, that thing of spending, again, this is another NHS crime, frankly. You know, a ream of A4 paper that you could buy on Amazon for about 99 cents for 500 sheets. You would... that the NHS were paying something like, in American money, were paying something like $27 for one of these things. And nobody could work it out. They must use probably 1 billion of these things a day in the NHS. It's one of the biggest employers, I think, outside the Chinese army or something like that. And I remember watching a programme where there was a surgeon and he said, he pulled out this scalpel from his toolkit. This is the kind of thing that, you know, Freddy Krueger would say, that's a bit too dangerous. You know, one of those real sort of specialised medical devices. And he said, do you know what this costs? And he said it costs something like, and it was like £500, this thing. He said, and he said to the interviewer, do you know why it costs £500? Because there's only one company makes it and there's only one company allowed to make it. And there's the problem. And if you open that up, that scalpel would have probably cost $20 within a couple of years. And it's been that. And I think the NHS are trying to learn that lesson, but it's taking them decades.
So now this brings back to politics. Joe Biden, as you know, recently announced that he has cancer. Yeah. And he mysteriously discovered he had cancer the weekend that this horrible book came out about how he was having this whole time. And everyone goes, that's BS.
Weekend at Bernie's, probably.
Yeah. He had the prostate cancer he has is slow onset. He clearly had it for months, probably years, whatever. And people started asking, well, why didn't someone give him a prostate exam? Because I don't know about you, man. If I go anywhere near a doctor, he's got the jelly out. He's ready to go. You know? Yeah. So, and their answer was, and this is actually true, once you hit a certain age, there's not a lot of indication for you to get the test because chances are the prostate cancer is going to go so slow. If you're already 80, 82, you're probably going to, die long before before it kills you.
Rather than of it.
And they made an argument. I think this is a legitimate point. When we tell these older men they have it, a lot of them just go, I want the treatment. Give me the treatment, whatever. They like, you radiate me. That costs a ton of money. Yeah. It's large. You don't want to say to the guy, look, nothing personal, but you're going to be dead before this.
And it could be so invasive that it causes a bigger problem.
If you make me pay for it and I'm 82, am I really going to pay for it? Or am I going to say, I'm going to leave that money to my kids because the guy's right. I'm probably not going to make it to 102 and so make pragmatic decisions. There's just no replacement for price, cost, and real live impact. There's just no replacement.
It's a great point to finish on. We drifted into all sorts of territory there, Michael. I love it. We started off with tariffs. You ended up with prostates. What about
my next show, we're going to come up with a lineup of your ex-girlfriends. I've already talked to your producer. The photos are going to be there. Yes. And we're going to roll through why each one of them dumped you. Yeah. So this is going to be very exciting.
Why Ellen has never heard of cosmetic surgery. That's another story. We can come on to that as well. Listen, great. Lots to talk about. Michael, thank you as ever. Michael Graham, here's our man on Capitol Hill, US political commentator, managing editor at Inside Sources. Crunching gear change. Robert Jenrick joins us next on Talk.
One of the things that a lot of people don't realise about cannabis, that excessive use can produce psychosis. Yeah. So we do get quite a lot of incidents within London of psychopathic behaviour of people who are extreme cannabis users. So there is some truth in the fact that it's a damaging drug.
Yeah, I think that's a massive issue that's often overlooked. People think of it as just some sort of, just a few people sort of sitting around smoking dope. It's not. That's certainly not the kind of drug that a lot of people are using.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
22 minutes after 3 o'clock. Now, Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick filmed himself confronting fare dodgers on the London Tube, even asking one if he was carrying a knife, warning their actions are chipping away at society. He's accused Sadiq Khan of neglecting public safety as he challenged offenders at Stratford Station in East London and escorted one to the British Transport Police. Fare evasion, by the way, I should say, has cost Transport for London £130 million a year, with a 3.4% of passengers dodging fares, more than double the target. Let's take another look at this video posted on X from Robert Jenrick earlier today.
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? Do you want to go back and pay like everybody else? Do you think it's all right not to pay? Why don't you go back and pay? You can say off as much as you want. But everyone else has to pay. You're carrying a knife, do you say? Nearly 1 in 25 people using London's public transport aren't paying for it. So there's 8 officers down there, but 1 minute away, that gate's wide open. It's also just annoying watching so many people break the law and get away with it.
Or at least most of it.
Right, should we go over here to these guys here? Excuse me, gents.
Hello, hello.
You're on camera, mate. You're banged to rights.
Just step to the side and...
All right, thanks very much, guys. It's the same with bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops. It's all chipping away at society. The state needs to reassert itself and go after lawbreakers.
And the Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick joins us now live from College Green. Robert, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. So is this a sort of new Louis Theroux type career going on here, or were you, attempting just to sort of raise some clearly very, very important issues? Because this is a bit of a departure for politicians, making your own kind of, I suppose, expose videos in this kind of way.
Yeah, look, I think there's a role for debate, asking questions, writing columns in newspapers, being very present here in Parliament. But sometimes you've got to get out of a suit, get out of Westminster, frankly, and shame the authorities into doing things. And I was just fed up seeing people dodging their fares, not just on the London Underground, but all over the country. I represent a community up in Nottinghamshire, and I've seen it there as well. And I felt that something had to be done. And so I've done this video, there's been a massive reaction to it, and now, at least in London, I want Sadiq Khan, our do-nothing mayor, to step up, pull his finger out and get to work.
Yeah, I mean, it should have been Sadiq Khan making a video like that, right? The mayor of London and effectively the Police and Crime Commissioner of London.
Well, can you imagine Sadiq Khan doing that? He was too busy saying that we should legalise cannabis this week to bother about shoplifting, mobile phone theft, fare dodging, the kind of things that Londoners actually want to see him doing. What we've got to see here is real action, because I think ordinary Londoners, as people across the country, they feel almost silly, they feel foolish that they are paying when they're going to work, going to school, going to college, going shopping, and they're seeing all these people who are breaking the rules. And although some people might demean this as minor, it isn't minor, because it has a big effect, and I subscribe to the broken windows idea that if you allow small acts of law breaking to take hold, it just spirals out of control, and step by step, society and the fabric of society is chipped away at.
100%. And I've seen people dodge the ticket as well. In fact, some almost breaking through the barriers, which must probably cost a fair amount of criminal damage as well in doing that. I've seen that happen on a few occasions. But from what I sense, Robert, that you were making a wider point here, not just about fare dodging, about a broken society, a society where all sorts of other areas, you alluded there to shoplifting, all sorts of things that are going on around us that don't really get the airtime but are happening on an industrial scale.
Yeah, I think there's a real issue at the moment. I do think there's a sense of broken Britain where people who do play by the rules are watching as others flagrantly breach them, and the public realm, the places that we live in and work in, feel like they are deteriorating as a result of an epidemic of shoplifting, mobile phones being stolen, shops like American candy stores and Turkish barbers proliferating on the high street, and people rightly asking questions about what is the demand for these, or are they just a front in some cases for money laundering or organised crime or illegal migration. And I think the state's got to reassert itself. It's got to have authority and respect again, so that people play by the rules and we restore confidence for people to go out and about in their communities and to feel that these are clean and safe places once again.
Is this part of a series? And I made the sort of odd joke about Louis Theroux at the beginning, but genuine question, Robert, is there, I mean, there seems to be scope in this. The response that we've had from what you released this morning on X has been really rather encouraging. Could this be the way that you and your party sort of re-emerge as a more relevant presence on the political stage? Today we had the Prime Minister in St Helens talking about reform as if they were the official opposition. Is this a way of getting you back essentially into the dialogue, into the relevance in the minds of people in this country?
Well, I want the Tory party to be the voice of working people across the country, and so we should 100% be focused on their concerns, not bothered about what Westminster or the liberal media thinks, but talking about the stuff that has a real impact on everyone's lives. I did a video earlier in the year about litter in Birmingham, long before that was being talked about in the media, and that had a big impact. I've taken up the issue of tool theft, where tradesmen are having their vans broken into, their tools nicked, and they're being sold in plain sight at car boot sales across the country. Again, that's an issue which the media have not spoken about enough, but should be. So I want the Tory party to be focused on these issues. I think if we do, then yes, people will think over time that we deserve their respect, their trust once again, because we seem to just be talking about the issues that people are focused on the most. And these are certainly not the issues you're going to find Keir Starmer talking about.
Yeah, but
you know, there's no way that he's onto these issues.
But he's replying to Reform UK on the big issues. He's not replying to the Conservative Party.
Well, that is just Keir Starmer trying to distract from his terrible record a year into office. But you're right to say that the Conservative Party lost a lot of trust, and that was for good reason, because a lot of people across the country feel that we let them down. We didn't deal with the big issues, whether that was immigration, the cost of living, some of our public services. And we need to prove that we are different, that we're frankly a different new Conservative Party. And one way that we can do that is getting out of Westminster and focusing on working people's concerns and showing that we're listening and that we care about them.
If you are the leader of the Conservative Party, and you knew I would ask this, Robert, if you are the leader of the Conservative Party by Christmas, and many people are speculating that could be the case, are you intending then to take up this more reform-like mantle that is a nod to their supporters, the kind of, for want of a better phrase, the common sense agenda?
Well, the Conservative Party has a leader in Kemi Badenoch, and she's working hard, holding the government to account. Just today, she's done a very powerful intervention on grooming gangs, herself putting out an extremely important video speaking to one of the victims of the rape gang scandal. But yes, I do want the Conservative Party to focus on the concerns of working people. That's immigration, it's the cost of living, and it's how we can get our public services in the British state working in the interests of ordinary people once again. Because I think many, many people across our country today feel that they're getting poorer, that nothing seems to be working, and that the state isn't working in their interests. And so the Conservative Party has to be the trade union of those people, fighting their corner every day of the week.
Doesn't it say something that your video is the one that's getting all the attraction and not the leader of the party? I'm not saying this to be mischievous or smart or anything, Robert, but it is rather interesting that it feeds into a big area of interest that people have in you, it seems.
Well, I'm just doing my job. I'm here as Shadow Justice Secretary to be raising these kinds of issues, and if I can use social media to do that, then that's just all, you know, that's all for the good. But Kemi has been working extremely hard, and as I say, I would highly recommend the very powerful video that she's put out today, which is pushing the Labour Party to do a full national inquiry on the grooming gang scandal that I think is one of the worst, probably the worst scandal that our country has known in its modern history. And I want to make sure that we expose that in all of its details so that we can get justice for the victims and ensure this doesn't happen again.
Which I think most people would certainly back that point. Robert Jenrick, thank you for your time. Robert Jenrick, Shadow Justice Secretary. Initially on that video that he released this morning, it's one of the reasons I find it really interesting is it's not the Robert Jenrick that you kind of think you know. You see him on TV. He came in here and joined us on the programme when he was trying to become leader of the party, lost out obviously to Kemi Badenoch. But at that point, at that time, it was, this didn't look like a man that was going to change the world. And I don't sense that Kemi Badenoch look, I'm going to have a look at the video that he just referred to. It's clearly really important work and fair play to Kemi if that's the area that she's going to continue to exploit, because somebody absolutely should do. And I will look it up, and I would urge anybody else to look it up. But I do sense with Jenrick there, he's doing something I don't think she could bring to the table in the same sort of accessible way, which is almost a re-imaging of Robert Jenrick. And I think it is important to ask him that question about whether he'll be leading the party, because certainly under the current leadership, the party's completely dead. Would Jenrick at the helm make a difference to you? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 25 to 4. Let's look at I love this story. Every now and again you see a story and think, I'm going to talk about that today. Whether anyone likes it or not, we are definitely going to talk about Greggs. Because, we've talked about Greggs in a number of ways over the years, from the knocking out the, fine sausage rolls to the move over to the vegan world, clearly with some level of success. In fact, so much so that Greggs sausage roll is being immortalised in wax. Over there at the Madame Tussauds Museum to mark National Sausage Roll Day next week. I didn't even know this existed. The pastry will be displayed on a regal blue cushion with a plaque celebrating its significant contribution to Britain's culinary heritage. For a limited time, it'll sit along cultural icons like Shakespeare, Stormzy and Sir David Attenborough. Wouldn't you like to be around a dinner table with those three? This is in the museum's Culture Capital Zone. Let's speak to Alex Diaz, senior reporter over there at The Sun, who's with us. I mean, over the years, Alex, you've covered a lot of stories.
I have.
And The Sun have within the DNA of The Sun is to literally bring you the biggest breaking stories of the day, but then knowing the pulse of the nation pretty much like no other newspaper on planet Earth. Once again, we're throwing another story. And who doesn't like a sausage roll story, for a start?
No, absolutely.
I mean, who doesn't like a sausage roll?
Oh, absolutely. Certainly, they went pretty quickly when we got sent a few today. It's...
they weren't wax ones?
No, they weren't. Those weren't wax ones, and they went in milliseconds. Our readers, they definitely like... the sausage roll from Greg's, and I'm sure they'll be lining up at Madame Tussauds.
Absolutely right. I mean, here's the thing with, your sausage roll, when you go to a party, it's the first thing that goes, isn't it, your sausage roll?
Mm-hmm.
People can have all sorts of flash ideas about vol au vents and, sandwiches lined, towered up with all sorts of elaborate fillings, but you lay a tray of sausage rolls out and those mummers are gone.
I mean, less is more, isn't it? So, yeah, absolutely.
Every time.
Yeah.
On a serious point, I quite like this, because Greg's has been going longer than I think, actually. I think it
started in 1951.
Right, there you go. Yes. So we weren't even alive at this time. 1951 in Newcastle.
Yes, that's right.
And it's kind of expanded. There's not one near where I live, and I wish there was one near where I live, because, popping in for a crafty sausage roll is sort of quite a British thing to do. But what they've done here is sort of taken, the iconic nature of the brand and gone, I tell you what, Madame Tussauds, we're going to include it in a cultural exhibition, basically.
It's a good bit of publicity for both brands, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Greg's obviously getting the sausage roll, such an iconic, honour, and Madame Tussauds paying tribute to, what is a British icon. So they're both winners.
And I quite like this, because often, if you ask, I don't know, the arts editor at the BBC, give us a list of British icons, it would never include Greg. They wouldn't get that. Their mind wouldn't go there. They might just drift into Pam Ayres territory, or possibly think that fish and chips is the thing to say. But they wouldn't think about it in this way. But, ordinary people, if you like, do think about stuff like this. It is, America have the big iconic McDonald's thing. Greg's is now up there.
Greg's has more than 2,500 locations across Britain
incredible.
now. So, they are the biggest bakery in Britain. They're, they are a staple of the high street. So, yeah, they are very much a British icon.
Can I just say, by the way, Greg's are not paying us for any of this. This is not a paid kind of promo thing. It's just a really interesting story. When I leave here, what happens to me, Alex, I go over to the station. As you know, there's a Greg's on London Bridge Station.
There is indeed.
And I'm quite tight on time, and the queue is always so big. I've yet to successfully buy a sausage roll at that particular time of day. I think that's an injustice.
Right. It is that kind of food, though, isn't it? It's on-the-go food that you can snack on anywhere you go, on a train, on anywhere you're on the move. So that's one of its big selling points.
Indeed. So somebody came up with this idea. I don't know how you make a sausage roll into wax, but if you can make, Stormzy and David Attenborough into wax, I guess you can do it with a sausage roll. Is there a specific process on this, do we know?
We're told that they used exactly the same process as they do with human figures to get all the details right, including the look of the 96 layers of puff pastry that go into a Greg's sausage roll, and
that's a great fact already.
The golden glisten of the roll as well. So they've clearly put a lot of work into it.
So, and I understand that, and we're looking at some images of it there online. Is that the wax one?
No, I believe that is.
Or is that just the regular sausage?
The wax one is mounted on a, as you mentioned,
on a blue cushion,
on a regal blue cushion, atop a plinth with a blue plaque that says pays tribute to its contributions to Britain's culinary heritage.
I understand that at Madame Tussauds, every now and again, when someone goes a bit kind of, become a bit irrelevant, to be polite, they melt them down and reuse them. So you might go, oh look, that's, Biden or something, but Biden used to be Julian Clary or something like that.
Is that right?
With a few modifications. I
wonder who's gone into the sausage roll.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Who is in the? I don't know, Cheryl Baker from Bucks Fizz. I don't know, were they ever in there? I've got no idea. Who, Kevin Keegan, or I don't know. It could be a little bit of somebody and a bit of somebody else. Who knows? This is a limited exhibition that's going on there, though, isn't it, at Madame Tussauds?
That's right. It's until the end of June.
So it's till the end of June. So if you want to check it out, it's essentially. It's on the blue cushion. It's got a plaque as well, hasn't it, celebrating its significant contribution to Britain's culinary heritage.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, and it's there in the cultural capital zone of the museum, where you can see, like I mentioned, Stormzy and Attenborough and Shakespeare and all the rest of it. I'm trying to think of other British icons now that we should turn to wax. See, you can't put KFC in there, can you, really, because they're not British?
No, they don't belong there.
But I would have Colonel Sanders in Madame Tussauds every day of the week.
Fair enough.
If he'd be in the entrance, frankly, you know. The man's a messiah, for goodness sake, you know. He'd definitely be there. Fish and chips, I suppose, is the one I mentioned a second ago.
Yeah, certainly fish and chips would deserve a place. But this is the first time that an individual food item has been made into a wax figure.
Finn, one of our producers, just said jellied eels should be in there. I couldn't go a jellied eel.
I passed on the jellied eel.
I'd give me the pie and mash.
Pie and mash all day, but the jellied eels, no.
That's a step
that's
too
too
far,
much. That's too much.
Frankly, isn't it? Tea bags we could put in there. Just tea could be in there. That's, you know, a clear British icon. Is a Scotch egg British?
I guess so. Yeah, it's Scottish. So yeah.
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 Is it what, Dave? A scone. He said a scone.
Scone, yeah, for sure.
Here's the thing, Alex. We should be really making our own museum, shouldn't we, really?
We could do, yeah.
I think we've got scope for an entire
found a niche.
wax-based British icons that you don't see anywhere else. Julia Hartley-Brewer could be in there as well. I mean, you know, she would be in there. Probably all the exhibits would be around her. She'd be on a throne. It'd be like the royal room that you go to see Julia. And then after you'd seen Julia, you could go and look at the wax sausages and stuff.
I'm sure they'd be queuing up round the block.
Indeed. Are you familiar with a kumquat?
I am not.
No, that's a fruit that we talked about yesterday, and every time we mention the word, people giggle.
That is a funny name.
Yeah, it's a very funny name. It's got a sort of bit of Charles Hawtrey and Benny Hill about it, you know.
It does indeed.
A kumquat. All of that's going on.
What does it look like? What kind of...
Apparently it's like a little orange thing of some, like a little orange fruit of some
I'll have to look that up on Wikipedia.
Yeah, I think you should, and we should also nominate it for the museum as well, even though it's probably not British. But it's there. Listen, great Greg's story. Alex, great to see you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Alex Diaz, senior reporter over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. Our lines are open, 0344 499 1000.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rachel Reeves, the architect of her own downfall, which I think is what you allude to, Mike.
Yes.
I mean, you know, they came in on the back of wanting more economic growth, and yet sort of spent the first 6 months talking the economy down, then whacking it with a huge amount of tax and spend, £76 billion a year of tax and spend, which will mean businesses have less to invest, which is clearly where you get growth from. And now you've got all this red tape coming down the track in the employment rights bills.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
One in from Hans, who says, whatever you think about politicians and modern politics, you cannot but admire and respect Robert Jenrick for what he did on the London Underground. It took real courage to do what he did and challenge those knife-carrying fare dodgers. Well done, Bob. You've got my vote, says Hans. There was genuinely an element of courage involved in that. I don't think, and one fellow, when I think he talked about having a knife, and he whispered something, and Robert Jenrick said, did you say you had a knife, or something like that, and then he didn't answer him. But confronting anyone who's just dodged their fare, being told to F off every other person, which is what happened to him, yeah, there's something in that. But then, look, you can't really make one of those a month, even if you picked a... Well, you could do something. The thing I'm thinking here, if you were an... Bear with me. I'm thinking if you were an advisor to Robert Jenrick, he said, right, you want to turn your party around and you want to have an impact on the electorate, and suddenly to change the narrative, which has been reform, 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 certainly on the centre-right of politics, then you've got to have a thing, right? You've got to have a thing going on. It doesn't work without a thing. In Reform UK, Nigel Farage is the thing. I don't mean the horror movie. He is the thing. He's that guy that's got it all. He's effervescent, he's verbose, he is rhythmic and mesmeric and just effortlessly knocks out a speech without a word written down beforehand, and does so in a very powerful, compelling way. That is his thing. It happens a lot in my industry. You have a thing. And that attracts people to you in the first place, and then they look at the detail of what you say. If he turned that into something where, he makes those really engaging videos and they're really good, and he's not dressed up in a suit when he's doing it, which is absolutely crucial to, I think, the point, without starting to look like, you know, when they ask a politician, what football team do you support? Or they think Aston Villa is West Ham. I think David Cameron made that error once, didn't he? Yeah, that kind of... Not that... but looking credible and looking as if you are on some kind of relevant mission that represents the concerns and views of ordinary people. We'll watch and see what he does next. Let's talk to Anne in Sussex. This is back to fly tipping. He could make a video on fly tipping, I suppose. Anne, good afternoon to you.
Oh, good afternoon, Ian. Before I get quickly to the fly tipping, water companies do not have to be consulted about whether they can supply water for house building. It should be a statutory consultation at each planning application that the water companies should say, look, we haven't got enough water. The government should step in and do that immediately. But coming back to fly tipping, this didn't happen a few years back.
Right.
We paid rates, didn't we? As a councillor, I could ring the works department. I'd say there's some rubbish here, a car that's been dumped there. And as soon as councils became big councils with special committees and the council tax increased, what do? We have the recycling centres. We make it very difficult for some people to get to them. Yeah. Not everybody has a car. And so we've got the situation that's costing millions because of items being dumped. But what we also should be doing, don't forget we're paying councillors a lot of money now as well. But what we should be doing is in some of our really desperate areas, every month a lorry or a van should go around and pick things up. And in fact, we used to organise that in some of our poorest, most vulnerable estates, because people haven't got vehicles, or if they find somebody with a vehicle who offers, they do what you've said. They dump it somewhere else. It's not right. We're not having a country to be proud of. And all the money that we're all paying on our council tax, I don't think our towns and cities are looking as if we can be proud of them anymore.
100%. And I think, not to deliberately do this, but to tie it into Robert Jenrick again, what he was saying in that video at the very end, he's talking really about a broken society, how we don't recognise society anymore. And there is, but bearing in mind what you've just said as well, there's something in this, isn't there? There's a genuine feel that we've really lost something. How do we get it back?
Well, I grew up caring about what happened around me. I grew up in the very poor back streets of Brighton, and you know, I hated it. But you know there's better. And I grew up, like many of our generation, actually wanting to make things better, But we seem to have a society that has been told, and this isn't accidental, the New World Order, whatever label you call it, is to actually confuse people, to tell them they can't cope, that somebody else should be doing what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And we're making people feel they're helpless. Whereas I grew up with nothing, but I thought there was better out there.
Yep.
And, there was a world we could be proud of. I cared about my neighbours. They cared about me. We worked together. No child was left abandoned. Well, no, I was, but that's beside the point. No child was left abandoned because I knew I would look after my neighbours' children and they would look out for mine.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I mean, look. The human journey is full of interesting little peaks and troughs and diversions, and maybe we'll get back on that track someday. And thank you very much indeed. I love what you said there at the end about just looking after each other in that kind of way. The world moves a little faster now, and not always a level of patience for that kind of stuff. Let's talk to Lenny. Lenny will remember those good old days when, you could leave your front door open, Lenny, on account of the fact you're 115. So I suppose there is that, Lenny. Good afternoon.
Well, I'm not that far off of it, but I remember we used to have a key hanging behind the letterbox.
Really? That if you forgot the key? Wow. And nobody thought that someone's going to come and stick their hand in and nick it?
No, that was it. We used to hang the key behind the letterbox on a piece of string, and then we didn't have to carry our keys to get in. Yeah.
There you go. They were the days, right? Anyway, yes. What have you got for us? What do you want to say, Lenny?
Well, regarding Starmer and Farage, with Starmer, the evidence is all there. He hasn't got a clue. And there's no one in the cabinet with any experience of creating growth for the country. Mm-hmm. There's no one there. And then you've got Farage, who is a successful businessman who can put a deal together.
Yeah.
And it's plain and simple.
It is that, isn't it? And I think that is resonating more than it ever did, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, Starmer, and the other thing is, I mean, Farage has got nothing about anything to worry about, anything that Starmer says, because none of us believe him. He's an out-and-out liar.
So this busted flush thing that politicians often are given that tag, aren't they, after they've had a few years in the job, and it's like, oh my God, we're fed up with this person. They all suffer it. Thatcher suffered it. John Major suffered it. Blair suffered it. You get to that point. But Starmer seems to have sort of excelled himself, really, because he's kind of reached that point before he's even started. He's not even been there a year.
I know, and that shows you how bad he is.
Yeah.
That's all just evidence on how bad the man is.
Curious times. Lenny, thank you very much indeed for that. Great call. This from Clayton in Dartford. Scotch eggs are British, originally made by Fortnum and Masons as kerchief food. You could eat it on the go. Scotch is nothing to do with Scotland. I didn't think it was. It merely means preserving food. One from Rob, forget waxwork sausage rolls. The thing I remember the most from my visit to Madame Tussauds is Kylie Minogue's legs. They were fabulous. Yeah, all three of them, but they weren't real. Let's go. I knew they employed the wrong artist when they did that one. This is Lewis in Lewis. Is that right, Lewis?
No, it's John in Lewis.
It's John in Lewis. OK. Yeah. John in... I love that. It says Lewis here. It doesn't matter. John, welcome along. What would you like to say?
Well, it could be the Labour, or it could be the Conservatives, could be Reform. If they ignore this net zero, sending money to the migrants, sending money to Ukraine, it's going to do something, but it's too late.
Yes.
The debt to GDP is nearly 100%.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's going to be a bond apocalypse. And unfortunately, the system's going to collapse.
Yep.
So I would say get your popcorn and just watch everything collapse around you. We cannot pay our debt. We are broke. America is broke. As I said, The debt to GDP is in the trillions, way more we can ever pay. Everything you are paying in tax at the moment is just going to service the debt.
Yes.
Nothing you pay.
There's no sense of we've got a few quid in the bank, is there? And that's, and I don't, look, I know debt is a crucial part of how the economic cycle works. I understand that, but there's clearly certain acceptable levels of it. If you've got no money to do anything with, no wiggle room anywhere, then someone's got to come along and recalibrate the whole system, surely. Listen, John, I have to move because we're about to hit the clock, but thank you very much indeed for that. Like you're thinking, Nicola in Norfolk, Jenrick is a changed politician in a positive way. However, it would make no difference if he was leader because the parliamentary party is stuffed full of wets who should really be in the Lib Dems. Well, that's why I wonder whether Jenrick's move is, when I say move, his move into making, fairly snappy, compelling videos telling a story of this country, in this case, criminality on the tubes down in London. If that became his thing, I could see, if he was leader of the party, that he would certainly have perhaps more conversations with Reform than Kemi Badenoch would have, which I think is probably zero at the moment. Here's a man who will know. If you had to guess how many meetings Kemi Badenoch's had with Reform, what would you say?
I don't know, actually. I would imagine a few. Anyway, yes, Robert Jenrick has certainly met a number of people within Reform, and there will be.
I'm not sure she has.
I'm not sure. I think she would probably keep her hands clean.
Yes.
On that one, but certainly I know Rupert Lowe has met Robert Jenrick as well, and is perhaps considering joining the Conservative Party.
You got a cup of tea with you?
In fact, this is a mug I've been sent for my birthday by Carol in Liverpool, which is very nice. She's sent away from it. It says, "A man on his cat, a bone that can't be broken," and there's a picture of Jack and me on it. Isn't that very nice?
This is your stuffed cat?
It's not stuffed. He's a real cat.
Oh, it's real, is it?
It's real.
I never thought it was... I used to think it was a puppet when I saw... I thought... Because no one would ever own a cat if you got a choice. You'd own a dog, right?
No, I'm a massive